Story 1.
Instant karma strikes, discovering my wife's cheating affair and confronting her in the act. The front entrance to our home is seldom used. We usually enter through the side door to the garage or the sliding glass doors leading to the patio. To the right of the entryway stands the formal living room, meticulously maintained but the least frequented room in the house. On the left, at the end of the entry, lies a hallway connecting to 3 bedrooms, including our spacious master suite and a guest bathroom. The formal living room, enveloped in darkness due to closed massive curtains, features a white camel-backed couch against the back wall, with large wing-back chairs on either side, all facing a walnut coffee table. Although insignificant until that day, late that morning, I found myself in a wing-back chair facing away from the archway between the entry and the living room. In that chair, I have often contemplated my life and assessed potential losses during Lynn's absence. The prospect of ending our troubled marriage brings concerns about our shared friends deciding their allegiances, the loss of our house, potential alimony payments for years, and the sudden disappearance of half my net worth alongside legal expenses. Despite these considerations, dealing with Lynn, whom I describe as vindictive, remains an inevitable challenge. Amid my reflections, the side door opens, signaling Lynn's return from grocery shopping. I realize I should have pretended to be in our bedroom to avoid another argument if caught in the living room. Arguments are commonplace, initiated by Lynn's unwarranted criticism for minor infractions, fabricated reasons, or no reason at all. I understand it as a tactic to keep me off balance. Lynn can prolong arguments for weeks over trivial matters, and I always find a way to placate her, believing it better to end disputes promptly. I deem life unbearable with constant friction and aim to settle fights as soon as possible, though the challenge lies in the short time until the next one. After 10 years of marriage, I see no solution other than passing away or divorce. Nonetheless, I persistently try to improve the situation, primarily for my sanity rather than to make things more pleasant for Lynn. I hear the freezer door shut, realizing she has put away the frozen food. Anticipating her request for me to get the remaining groceries, I brace myself for her orders and criticism. To avoid her for as long as possible, I remain motionless, waiting for her call or whistle. The whistle, resembling that of a dog, has become nearly unbearable. Instead of her voice, I hear light footsteps as she approaches the entryway. If I had looked, I would have seen her stop at the tiled entry floor, peering down the hallway to ensure she is alone. Quietly waiting, Lynn contemplates calling me in the car before getting home, but feels safe assuming I am diligently working on the gazebo in the backyard. Within seconds, I hear her cell phone chirp as she dials a number. Now in the entry, just feet away from the back of the chair where I sit, Lynn speaks to her father about plans for Thursday afternoon. She mentions calling him at work after 1 and the logistics of their meeting. Still unnoticed, I listen as Lynn discusses details with her father, concluding with a light-hearted farewell. I hear the flip phone close, and her footsteps retreat across the carpet towards the sliding glass door, whistling and calling out to the gazebo project she had been working on in the backyard. She seemed oblivious to my labored breathing and the pounding of blood in my heart and head. Tense situations were not new to me, and I relied on automatic responses honed from my experiences in the army and elsewhere. In such moments, the first rule was not to panic unless actively under attack, utilize knowledge to one's advantage, choose the right time to engage, maintain a blank face, control breathing, and appear normal. I stood and entered the den stating, "I'm here, I was in the bathroom, I've got to run to the hardware store and get parts for the gazebo." Crossing through the den toward the kitchen and the side door while avoiding eye contact with her. Marveling at my ability to articulate those words and my restraint from reacting violently, I walked by, and she gave me a look, noticing the redness in my face and advising me to wear a hat. She expressed concern about potential sunburn, saying she didn't want to see my skin peeling off in a couple of days. Additionally, she informed me about groceries that needed to be brought in before going anywhere, and emphasized not being gone all day. After dropping her phone into her purse on the kitchen counter, Lynn went out to inspect my work on the gazebo, leaving criticisms for my return. Lynn's communication style was typical, mostly involving instructions and implied or explicit criticism. As she entered the backyard, I retrieved her phone, checked the last dialed number, memorized it, and returned the phone to her purse. After putting away the groceries, I left in my small pickup truck, but didn't head for the hardware store. I stopped at a local park a couple of blocks away. For the first 15 minutes, I replayed the short conversation in my mind, wanting to ensure I had every word memorized to make notes. There was no doubt about its meaning me wife was having an affair, likely in our house, maybe even in our bed while I was at work. Furious, I felt I was subsidizing her infidelity by working to support her. Who was the man she called Daddy? It wasn't her real father, the area code was local, and her parents lived 1,000 miles away in California. In the early days of our marriage, she sometimes called me daddy during lovemaking moments, though she had stopped doing so. I had thought she might be signaling a desire for kids, but we decided not to have children a couple of years into the marriage. She was undeniably a daddy's girl. Considering practical matters, I pondered my best course of action. Her lover would enter through the back gate on Thursday, likely walking down the alley. I contemplated ambushing him there, but wondered about dealing with my cheating wife. If the lover was on foot, his car had to be nearby. It struck me the lover would probably leave his car at the park. Determining who this person was became crucial. The obvious approach was to call the number from her cell phone, having someone else make the call as if by mistake seemed plausible, with a woman being the most likely to get information. Who could make that call? Who else might know about this? The answer was clear. Lynn's best friend was Sue. If Sue didn't know, I doubted anyone else did. Lynn's sister was unlikely to have information since they had not been close since the sister's messy divorce and subsequent estrangement from the family. Could I ask Sue? I had known her as long as Lynn had, and Sue had always been my friend too. However, women could be more loyal to each other than to their spouses. Sue was married to Nick, who was 15 years her senior, and they seemed to be the most loving couple in the world. I figured that Sue would tell Nick almost anything. Would she disclose information about Lynn, though? Did I consider Nick a friend? We weren't close friends, but Nick was an upstanding guy, and I would have thought Nick would have told me if he'd known about something like this. I decided to try Nick. That meant a drive to the golf course, where Nick, semi-retired, donated time on Saturdays as a goodwill ambassador for the course in exchange for a free round of golf during the week when the course was not full. On the way over, I planned my approach very carefully. I couldn't just blurt it out. What if the news got back to Sue and then to Lynn? I had to be cautious. Riding in a golf cart with Nick as he checked on conditions at the 7th hole, I brought up a hypothetical question. I inquired about his approach to confidential conversations, asking whether he would feel obligated to keep it confidential or if he would share it with Sue. Nick gave me an odd glance and continued driving for several yards. I clarified, asking if he and Sue always shared what they heard from other people. Even if it was shared in confidence, it was just a hypothetical scenario. Nick pulled over onto the grass, turning to look directly at me with an almost expectant expression. In response to my inquiry, he said, "Do you have a specific question for me? If you do, ask away," maintaining the same strange and intense look on his face. I asked Nick if he could keep our conversation confidential if I were to pose a question. I made a promise that I wouldn't mention it unsolicited, but if Sue were to inquire, I wouldn't lie to her. That was my operating principle. I assured him that I could keep a secret, but wouldn't deceive my friend's wife. It was evident that Nick knew something, and I sensed that he wanted to share it with me. After composing myself, I directly asked him if he knew anything about a possible affair my wife might be having. I rephrased to make it clearer, asking if he had any knowledge of an affair Lynn was currently having or had in the past. Nick's response flowed out like a dam bursting. He recounted an incident from last New Year's at the Holden's party. Everyone was outside preparing for the fireworks display when Sue, despite her infrequent drinking habits, fell ill from the champagne. She went upstairs to the bathroom. On the landing, she heard someone attempting the doorknob while she was getting sick in the toilet. When she washed up and left the bathroom, she heard noises coming from down the hall where it turns towards some bedrooms. She was afraid that someone else might be ill, so she walked down there and looked. Lynn was up against the wall at the end of the hallway, and some big dude was, well, there's no good way to say I had her against the wall with her legs wrapped around his waist. Lynn saw Sue standing there, and she smiled and did a little wave off, like, "Get the hell out of here." On the way home, she shared the details with Nick. Sue and Lynn, being long-standing friends, needed to discuss matters before taking any action. I suggested immediate disclosure to me. Ultimately, Sue had a conversation with my wife, who conveyed that the incident with Buddy White was a one-time occurrence, fueled by drinks, a disagreement with me, and aggressive advances from Buddy, a known bully who married into wealth. Sue, aware of Buddy's reputation, requested that Nick keep it under wraps, not wanting to jeopardize my marriage over a singular event. However, Nick made it clear to Sue that if I ever directly inquired about it, he wouldn't lie. "The burden of this secret has weighed heavily on me for the past 5 months," Nick confessed. "I'm relieved it's out in the open, but I'm deeply sorry for what you're going through, man. Unfortunately, it's not over." Sue deceived herself. Lynn has been involved with Buddy or perhaps someone else by now. I overheard her talking to him on the phone just an hour ago. Let's head back to my place and discuss what Sue has to say. We left the golf course in separate vehicles and headed to Sue and Nick's place. He conveyed the news to his wife, and she sat down in tears. She had harbored high hopes for my and Lynn's relationship, willing to offer any support she could. However, upon learning that the affair was ongoing, her demeanor shifted. Sue experienced a sense of betrayal similar to what Lynn had caused. Up until now, she had believed the assurance that the affair had ended and had based her actions or, rather, inaction on that falsehood. "Sue, there's something you could do for me," I said. "I examined Lynn's phone, and I have the number she called. Would you mind giving him a call, pretend it's a wrong number, and try to obtain his name? I want to confirm who she's involved with now." Sue, an editor working remotely, held a Ph.D. in English literature and possessed a theater background. Devising the call with her finest acting and social engineering skills, she opted for her faultless English accent, consistently leaving a lasting impression. Dialing with the phone on speaker, she heard, "Hi, this is Buddy White." Sue blinked. "Sorry, wrong number." "Well, that was surely unsatisfying," she commented, her entire scenario unraveling. Yet the revelation was clear: Lynn hadn't terminated the affair with White, adding another piece of crucial data. Discussing our next steps, I insisted on catching the duo during their upcoming Thursday encounter, aiming for extensive ammunition. I wanted to confront my wife armed with abundant facts, catching her in flagrante delicto and exposing the lies she'd inevitably used to conceal the situation. Expressing reluctance to hire a detective due to costs and uncertainty about Lynn's interactions before Thursday, I sought a swift means to gather evidence. They fell into contemplative silence for a minute or more. Sue suggested the idea of a mole. She proposed the notion of having someone like Lynn's best friend extract the truth from her. I was skeptical, but Sue insisted, saying, "Never underestimate an angry woman. I've had enough of her and how she's treated us all. I believe I can craft a story that will compel her to divulge everything." Over the next hour, we devised a plan, with Sue urgently calling Lynn, claiming a desperate need for help, and arranging a Sunday morning coffee meeting. Nick would modify Sue's old purse to hold a video camera, recording every word and facial expression. By noon on Sunday, they anticipated having substantial information. Sue promptly contacted Lynn, referencing a situation akin to the New Year's party. Lynn agreed to the meeting, secretly pleased with her friend's newfound assertiveness. Sue arrived early at the coffee shop, choosing a table under an awning, arranging her purse with the concealed camera, ensuring the optimal angle, and conducting audio tests. She positioned chairs strategically. The air was calm, eliminating wind noise possibilities. She set it up for one-button recording, the 16 gigabytes card offering ample storage. Nick had ingeniously secured the camera and purse with Velcro straps, disguising lens and mic holes within the purse's pattern. Sue was prepared. As Lynn arrived, Sue asked Lynn to grab coffee, mentioning that she would save their spot in the most secluded area. Sue pressed the button when Lynn returned with the drinks, swiftly confirming the recording. They quickly covered the basics, and Sue began her tale. Sue expressed her dilemma to Lynn, mentioning that there's this guy who's interested in her. She didn't know what to do, describing him as attractive, especially since it had been ages since she and Nick were making love. Sue shared that Nick completely trusts her and that she's never cheated on him. However, she admitted feeling tempted now and sought Lynn's advice. Sue wanted to understand how Lynn felt after the New Year's party and asked if she would regret going through with it. Lynn responded by encouraging Sue, saying, "Go for it, girl. Honestly, I can't fathom why you haven't done this sooner. Nick's nice and all, but honey, he's past his prime. You're still young and cute. I've always admired your appearance, but I've never understood why you waste your time with Nick." Sue was surprised by Lynn's lack of remorse and asked if the New Year's party was genuinely a one-time thing. Lynn explained, "Honey, I won't lie to you. I had to tell you that at the time, or you might have spilled the beans. But now that you're in a similar situation, we can share all this. In fact, we'll be having some real steamy discussions." Lynn spilled everything. "I'm so into this now that I'm thinking of doing it myself. How did it start with you and Buddy? Are you still at it? You should see the look in your eyes. If you're not excited now, I bet you will be in a few minutes." Lynn proceeded to share details about her encounter with Buddy at Holden's Halloween party. She described how they met 2 months before, with Buddy eyeing her at the party. Lynn explained that they discreetly met on the landing and ended up in the bathroom. She recounted the passionate encounter, emphasizing Buddy's qualities. Lynn affirmed that she was still with him and would be meeting him next week in her own bed. Sue inquired about me, expressing concern about any feelings of guilt. Lynn dismissed any guilt, stating, "Sue, Paul's a husband. You can't treat a husband like a lover. They serve different roles. Paul is there to do what I want. Buddy is there for good closeness." Lynn explained her strategy with me, treating me like a good provider who follows orders. She mentioned using diversionary tactics, like checking for perfume, to make me believe she'd never cheat. Lynn likened having me around to having a little gay friend, describing me as docile and someone she could control. She highlighted the freedom she enjoyed, knowing my whereabouts and never worrying about me catching her with a lover. Sue asked Lynn if she had other lovers, and Lynn replied that she couldn't count them all. The first one was in their first year of marriage, picked up in a supermarket. He never knew her real name, and they bounced around hotel rooms for 6 months until he got too clingy. Lynn mentioned the need to watch out with young guys. After that, there were a series of one-offs, including a salesman friend into kinky stuff, which worked well as he only came to town a few times a year. Lynn stated that she had kept Buddy busy for longer than almost any of them, describing him as a hound with a hole-splitting tool. Lynn shared details about Buddy being married to a clueless woman who worked while he played around. She mentioned being in control of when he could visit her. Then Lynn asked Sue about her new conquest, and Sue ran through her prepared story about her fictional lover Rod. The details weren't important, but Lynn believed every word, encouraging her to take full advantage. Sue expressed amazement at Lynn's control and doubted if she could treat Nick the way Lynn treated me. Lynn explained the dynamic in the animal kingdom, comparing dominant individuals to the rest of the pack. Lynn asserted her alpha position with me and encouraged Sue to take on a similar role with Nick, assuring her that freedom would be hers. Lynn suggested starting with Rod and enjoying every second, stating that Nick would still be there and would fit into his natural submissive role. Lynn addressed concerns about STDs and asked if Sue used contraceptives. Sue explained that most of the time she made the guy use a contraceptive, but with Buddy, it was different due to his aggressiveness. Sue mentioned getting scared once because it hurt to pee, but the doctor said it was irritation from rough closeness. There was a time when she got infected with gonorrhea, and after that, she was more careful. Sue asked how she kept that from me, and Lynn described allowing me to go out by mentioning my interest in playing guitar with my pals. She looked at me deadpan and gave me the choice, leading to a confrontation later when she took antibiotics. Sue, eager to get the recording back to Nick and me, thanked Lynn and left for home. The conspirators watched the video, appalled. Sue and Nick could hardly recognize Lynn because she was never so harsh on me when others were around. I was shocked, though not as much as the couple, having come to know that Lynn was capable of almost anything. Sue brought up Anita White and mentioned her concerns about Anita's knowledge of her husband's infidelity. She expressed the dilemma of whether to inform Anita about Buddy being with Lynn, considering the risk of Anita blowing the cover. Sue described Anita as seeming deeply unhappy with her husband's reputation as a bully, and pondered if Anita might be entirely cowed by him. Sue suggested that talking to Anita might affect her plans, and sought help from Lynn in handling the situation. Sue thanked us for our assistance and assured that we would be kept out of further details. She specifically asked me not to do anything stupid. In response, I acknowledged the mistakes I had made over the past years but clarified that I didn't intend anything violent. I assured them that I would handle the situation in my way and requested strict confidentiality. I asked everyone to avoid answering if Anita called, taking full responsibility. Later that evening, Sue phoned Anita White and introduced herself. She confirmed they had talked at Holden's parties and asked if Anita could talk freely. Sue then broached the subject, revealing that Buddy was cheating on Anita with someone Sue knew. She expressed regret and conveyed Anita's right to know. Silence followed on the other end, with Sue discerning sniffles and sobs. Anita shared her frustration, mentioning past issues that Buddy claimed were resolved a year ago. She had taken him back based on his promise, with a clear warning of ending the relationship if he repeated his mistakes. Sue offered comfort and assistance, expressing a willingness to help based on Anita's decision. Anita, appreciating the concern, outlined her resolution. She emphasized that her partner would never share her bed again, detailing the terms of a stringent prenuptial agreement that would leave him penniless in case of divorce due to proven infidelity. She described him as unfit for employment, good only for accompanying her to events and engaging in extramarital affairs. She affirmed her determination to ensure he faced the consequences. In response to my offer to gather evidence, Anita committed to maintaining composure for a few days until she had the evidence in her hands. Plans were made for someone to collect preliminary evidence from my office the next day. Sue arranged a meeting, contacting me at work to schedule an appointment in her office on Monday at 1 p.m. Entering Sue's office with a video camera, I introduced myself to Mrs. White, the wife of the man involved with my wife. I placed the camera on her desk, cued the relevant section, and played the recording. Despite the faint screen visibility, the audio quality was excellent. Witnessing Mrs. White's tears, I offered a comforting gesture, acknowledging her familiarity with her husband's behavior over time. Subsequently, I revealed my plans to Anita, stating that participation was optional but extending the offer nonetheless. Anita disclosed the years of intimidation she had endured, expressing her desire to turn the tables and make her husband suffer. When asked about potential violence, I acknowledged that things might get messy, but assured her I had no intention of causing damage. Following the meeting with Anita, work became an unwelcome distraction. Lingering effects of Lynn's words in the video affected me deeply. While acknowledging some truth in her remarks, I defended my conciliatory nature, understanding her perception of me as a wimp. Despite the hurt, I contemplated showcasing a different side of myself on Thursday, pondering how Lynn would react to a more assertive approach. I dismissed any idea of reconciliation, recognizing the irreparable loss of trust in our relationship. Tuesday and Wednesday were marked by reduced office productivity as I meticulously reviewed potential scenarios. The complexity of variables reminded me of the fragility of well-laid plans. Multiple potential outcomes, including my preferred approach, were considered. Thursday's events would necessitate improvisation, and I dedicated time to refining my physical abilities in anticipation. At home, tensions prevailed, limiting conversations to necessities. Lynn, typically assertive, observed my recent behavior, aiming to understand the issue and regain control. Ironically, she found herself anticipating Thursday, speculating on the potential insights a passionate encounter with Buddy might provide. On Tuesday night, as Lynn showered, I searched my dresser drawers for a childhood keepsake from my grandfather. Both my father and grandfather had military backgrounds. After Normandy, Grandpa had acquired a set of steel knuckles from a German soldier as a war souvenir. As I examined the menacing steel equipment, I recalled Grandpa's caution about its use, but acknowledged that it might be handy someday. That day had nearly arrived. It was a form of war. Lynn and her lover had engaged in unfair play, prompting me to force a hearty breakfast on Thursday. I knew I wouldn't eat lunch, but hoped to slow down my rival. Pacing in my office, I deposited items in the guest bedroom, contingent on Lynn's choice of waiting in the backyard or returning inside. After opening the gate, regardless, I could adapt. Manipulating the set of knuckles on my desk, I paced, stoking my controlled anger. By 1, I changed into jeans, a t-shirt, and sturdy running shoes. Checking my pocket cell phone, keys, knuckles, and wallet, called Lynn from my desk phone to preempt her call. The conversation was calm and non-threatening, explaining meetings and phone unavailability, anticipating a possible delay in returning home. Lynn interpreted my call as a sign of returning docility. Relaxing with this knowledge, perhaps she'd reward me with a cool-down makeup session that evening. She prepared to meet her lover, and the two drove to the park. In 20 minutes, Loverboy's car was absent, so Anita dropped him off, and he jogged to his house. Slipping into the backyard through the side gate positioned behind a fatina bush on the house's end away from the garage. I waited nervously, checking the muted phone's time. At 1:45, Lynn emerged in the backyard dressed in a string bikini heading to the back gate. After unlocking it and surveying the alley, she closed the gate and settled into a lounge chair under the pecan tree. This signaled me. I had left the side gate ajar. I slipped back through the opening, circled to the front door, and, using my key, opened it. Walking over the spot where my wife's betrayal had been exposed days earlier, I entered the spare room. I grabbed a cordless drill and some hardware. Entering the master bedroom in less than a minute, I installed a hasp on the inside of the door, leaving a lock hanging. Placing a small piece of wood between the door edge and the jamb, I ensured it wouldn't close, just in case my wife attempted to shut it. Heart pounding, I took the drill to the guest room, picked up the video camera, adorned my right hand with brass knuckles, and waited. Many things could have gone wrong. Guy might have forgotten a step. Lynn could have unlocked the gate earlier, or her lover could have arrived prematurely. Fortunately, none of that occurred. With controlled breath, I awaited the final assault, planned and executed on my terms. Standing, brass knuckles on my right hand, I held the video camera, peering through the slightly open guest bedroom door. The dark hallway might impact video quality, but the audio would be crucial. As the sliding glass door moved and voices emerged, Lynn's laughter mingled with a male growl. Imagining the man's hands on her, I glimpsed my wife's bikini top already discarded, entering the master bedroom with her lover, neglecting to close the door. I followed at a distance, still recording. Kneeling at the door, I observed Buddy embracing Lynn, who closed her eyes and unbuttoned his shirt. Carefully, I set the video camera on the dresser inside the door, capturing the unfolding scene on the bed. This waiting was the most challenging, a desire to record the undeniable act, leaving no room for denial, fueled by my suppressed rage. Retreating from the door, I stood prepared, limiting peeks to avoid detection. I observed the couple caressing, both now undressed, with an entire afternoon ahead. They took their time, surrendering to passion. Outside the door, I overheard Lynn referring to Buddy as Daddy, confirming my suspicions about her issues. Anticipating retribution, I couldn't wait to confront them. I heard Buddy's voice expressing eagerness. Peeking again, I saw the man between Lynn's legs, then witnessed the plunge and heard her scream in an unprecedented manner. They began moving together, uttering curses and unintelligible sounds. Having seen enough, I touched the brass knuckles for luck and silently approached the bed. Lynn noticed me just before I forcefully shoved Buddy in the ribs, ejecting him from her. Screaming, he accused Buddy of violating my wife. Shocked, Buddy's face transformed, and he reverted to his bullying demeanor, moving to deal with me. I withdrew a few steps as Buddy turned the far corner of the bed, heading toward me. Misinterpreting my move as a retreat, Lynn, now on her knees, clutched the covers, yelling for me to get out and not hurt Buddy. I shifted back on my trailing foot, took a running step, and hurled myself into Buddy's chest, delivering the brass knuckles forcefully to the solar plexus. They crashed to the floor, with my full weight compressing his chest. In situations where breathing is compromised, all other considerations become irrelevant. Buddy pushed, attempting to dislodge me, emitting a high-pitched whining noise, struggling for breath. Panic filled his eyes. Sitting up and straddling my opponent, I observed Buddy's hands pressing on the floor, trying to find a better position to breathe. I then administered the coup de grace, raising my right hand high and bringing the steel on my fist down directly onto the center of Buddy's terrified face with considerable force, with nowhere for his head to recoil and mitigate the blow. I heard bones satisfyingly crunch and witnessed blood pouring from Buddy's ruined face. Hindered by blood flowing into his mouth and throat, Buddy was completely incapacitated. I got up, walking toward the door, content with the initial confrontation, ignoring Lynn's screams until her plea for help reached me. I realized she thought I was leaving, aligning with the plan for psychological warfare. After kicking the small wood piece away from the jamb, I closed the door and locked the hasp in place. Turning to face Lynn, I observed her expression shift from anger to frantic realization that we were all locked in. She was undressed and had no protection from this unpredictable version of her husband. In response, she altered her tone, pleading with me, "Paul, oh Paul, I know it looks bad, but he forced me into this. He's a bully. He threatened to hurt me and you too. He said he would destroy you to have me. I had to do it. I didn't want to." Approaching the bed slowly as she delivered her explanations, I maintained a stoic expression, dismissing her with a stern command. I stated, "Shut up, you're lying. I know you've been involved with him for months." Redirecting my attention to the wounded person on the floor, who was gurgling and showing signs of distress. I made it clear that I wanted Buddy hurt, not dead. Carefully positioning him close to the iron bedstead, I placed him on his side for blood drainage. Retrieving 5 pairs of handcuffs from the top dresser drawer, I proceeded to secure Buddy's ankles and wrists to the bedstead with 4 of them. Returning to my prone wife, I maneuvered her legs off the bed, secured her hands behind her back, and guided her into the bathroom, seating her on the toilet. I conveyed a stern message, urging her not to cause any damage and insisting that it was time for her to confess. While speaking, I emphasized the presence of brass knuckles on my right fist, ensuring she noticed them. I demanded the complete narrative: how she met the other person, the reasons behind her actions, and why she thought it acceptable to betray me. Additionally, I sought details about her involvement with other men over the past decade, making it clear that we had ample time to unravel the story. Throughout the afternoon, Lynn made a calculated decision, considering that I wouldn't be spending time with her lover. I knew some details about her actions, but the extent of my knowledge remained uncertain. Questions lingered in my mind. Could she manipulate certain aspects to make her fidelity sound less treacherous? Was she daring enough to lie? Lynn expressed her reluctance, sharing that she never intended for the situation to unfold as it did. She described the aggressiveness of an imposing individual who approached her at a party hosted by the Holdens, ultimately luring her upstairs. Unaware of the person's intentions, Lynn found herself in a vulnerable position with no one around to assist. Curious about the details, I inquired, "What party was that?" Sue, having witnessed the incident, could provide additional information. Confirming that I had cornered her in my quest for more information, Lynn speculated that Sue or Nick might have exposed her. She insisted that Sue had witnessed only the New Year's party, but I countered, reminding her that it was Halloween when she had been with the other person over 20 times. Determined to uncover the truth, I questioned her about who might have revealed her secret. With a sense of defiance, Lynn responded, "You'd be surprised how many people. Do you think Loverboy is told?" Maybe it was one of them, but that doesn't matter. If Sue told you this, that person, I'll claw her eyes out. But I know something about her that will wreck her marriage, and I'll sure as hell use it. After Lynn shared details about Sue's fabricated lover, Rod, she claimed credit for inventing him for my benefit. She described how they orchestrated conversations to extract information, with Sue recording the entire exchange and storing it on multiple DVDs to be sent out at her discretion. Lynn clarified that Sue hadn't initially informed her of the situation, and no specific details were provided by Sue regarding the revelation about the New Year's party. I pointed out that I had learned about her extensive history during a video conversation. I recalled a phone call Lynn made to her lover last Saturday in our entryway, where she openly expressed affection for him, inadvertently disclosing everything about her past. Convinced that I had sufficient information, I informed her that any further communication should be directed to my lawyer and that legal papers would be served in a couple of days. Expressing the need to consult with an attorney about our situation, I pulled out my cell phone and called Anita to handle the situation. After a brief conversation, I chuckled and ended the call. Marching Lynn back into the bedroom, I showed her the sorry state of her lover undressed, handcuffed, wheezing, and covered in blood, almost causing her to vomit. I deposited her on the bed, turned off the video camera, unlocked the bedroom door, and opened it for Anita, who had been waiting outside in her car. Addressing Anita, I remarked, "Well, Anita, I saved you some of him. His face is not much to look at now, though. Here's his latest lover-me soon-to-be former wife. Lynn, have anything to say to her?" Anita approached Lynn, sitting on the bed, and slapped her hard across the left cheek, evening out the red marks on her face. Expressing frustration, Anita berated Lynn for her foolishness and revealed how highly she had regarded the man lying on the floor. Turning to me, Anita pondered, "What are we going to do with him now? Anita, I'm inclined to toss this one out the door, with no clothes on, and see how long it takes him to find another companion. Get it, companion?" I expressed relief that she had preserved his tool for me. I mentioned having a razor-sharp new hunting knife and suggested cutting off his tool to present it to Lynn, who seemed to adore it. Additionally, I considered stashing his balls in the vault for the safety of women in the town. I intended to enforce my prenup, putting his balls in a vice, as he would get nothing if caught cheating. We planned to escort him to the hospital, providing a fabricated story about finding him injured in the garage. This would ensure his cooperation, knowing he could be cut off without a dime. Perhaps I'd throw him a few crumbs. Regarding Lynn, I mentioned her attachment to her father and pondered if there was more to their story during her upbringing, though lacking any proof. In the event of a messy divorce, I noted that her father might disinherit her, as he did with her sister, to protect his reputation and substantial inheritance. Even after the divorce, I would retain intriguing videos to share if necessary, keeping her in check. I decided to let her get dressed, take her car, and find a place to reflect, cautioning that her at the moment and credit cards wouldn't work. I provided her with a quarter, sarcastically remarking it was for a two-bit fancy woman. Maintaining a distant friendship with Anita, we sometimes reached out to each other when feeling low, both hesitant to dive into another relationship after being burned. I acknowledged the pain caused by my harsh treatment of Lynn during the ordeal, recognizing it wasn't the real me. Despite likening it to war, where cruelty can emerge, I vowed never to be in that position again. However, I had no regrets about marring Buddy's face. Anita's insurance covered basic repairs to Buddy's face, and she cut him loose with a little more money than the prenup required. His attempts to attract women proved challenging in the ensuing months. My depression deepened, and I faded from sight. Lynn accepted a fair settlement and moved in with her sister, seeking help. She grappled with the severe miscalculation of her actions, feeling sick when watching nature shows about animals of prey. Terms like alpha dog or pecking order triggered discomfort, and nightmares about that night with Buddy and me occasionally haunted her. Despite occasional feelings of missing me, I harbored no such sentiments towards her.
Story 2.
What's that familiar saying? When life gives you lemons, make lemonade, right? As I parked in front of the building containing our one-bedroom apartment, shared with my wife, Kelly, I'd pondered the state of our marriage. Was it transforming into a basket of spoiled lemons? Or was it just my imagination? Exiting the car, I retrieved the mail from our box. More bills, ads, and mostly addressed to occupant. I felt exhausted, a regular occurrence from working 16 hours a day, 4 days a week, not to mention the one day off from the nearby fast food place. The reason for my hectic schedule was simple. We had bills to pay, and we aimed to save for a future house. Additionally, I wanted to plan something special for Kelly on our approaching 5th anniversary. It's not like Kelly doesn't contribute. She manages the home and works at a travel agency, though the pay isn't exceptional. As for me, I dedicate 40 hours a week to a customer service job where I'm constantly on the phone addressing complaints or processing orders for our clients. It can become monotonous, but the pay is decent, and we enjoy a great benefits package. I earn $18 per hour, with monthly commission checks and a bonus every 6 months, based on the company's overall performance. Typically, my commission checks exceed my hourly wage. On top of that, I work part-time at the fast food place, handling orders and transactions. It may sound mundane, and at times it is, but it's a welcome break from my regular routine. I've been juggling both jobs for almost 2 years, and it's starting to wear on me. On the positive side, I've stabilized our finances and saved a substantial amount for a house down payment, bringing in over $7,000 a month before taxes. My plan is to eventually quit the second job once our financial situation allows. After our upcoming anniversary cruise, I intend to reassess our finances. Due to my schedule, Kelly has been handling the bills for the past year, and so far, she seems to have things under control. Through her job, Kelly secured tickets for a 5-day Caribbean cruise for us at a significant discount. Consequently, I indulged and upgraded to a suite with a balcony and a pleasant ocean view. I eagerly anticipated spending quality time alone with her on the open water. Both of us arranged to take vacation simultaneously, set to depart after work tomorrow, which happened to be Friday. I trudged up the stairs to our apartment and opened the door. The place was dark, and I couldn't hear anything except the clock on the wall. Strange, I thought. Kelly didn't mention not being home. Placing the mail on the table, I flipped the light switch. The place was clean and tidy as usual, but something felt amiss. "Kelly, I'm home," I called out, receiving no response. Entering the kitchen, I noticed nothing prepared. Typically, she leaves a covered plate in the refrigerator on days I return home late, but there was nothing. In the bedroom, the bed was made up, but Kelly was nowhere to be found. I pulled out my phone and attempted to call, but it went straight to voicemail. "Kelly, this is Sam," I said. "By the way, Sam Carmichael. Where are you? I'm at the apartment. Please call me." I hung up and sent a text, receiving no response. In the closet, I noticed several items missing from her side. Where could she have gone? I wondered. Did she leave me? Opening her dresser drawers, I noticed some of her things were gone. In the bathroom, most of her toiletries were missing. Then, I saw it. An envelope on the bathroom counter, addressed to me in her handwriting. Shaky, I grabbed the envelope and opened it. Moving to the living room, I sat down and read her letter. The letter began without the usual, "Dear Sam," just Sam. This didn't bode well. As I continued reading, it conveyed that she was aware this might be difficult for me to comprehend and anticipated my anger. She expressed a desire to explain that she had been involved in an affair for the past several months and was currently with the other person on the cruise we had planned for our anniversary. She mentioned our discussions about having children, but confessed that she didn't want to have children with me. She acknowledged my qualities as a hard worker and provider, stating that I would make a wonderful father to whatever children she had. She revealed that she had stopped taking contraception at her lover's request for the last 3 weeks to ensure he would be the one to get her pregnant. She apologized for the coldness of her words and assured me that her lover, Jake, was a good man in more ways than one. According to her, everyone at work was aware of their relationship and supported their decision to go away together. The letter continued, stating that her colleagues believed I would be an excellent father to the children Jake and she planned to have. She admitted to having fallen in love with Jake, but clarified that it was not the same love she felt for me as a husband. She likened her current feelings to the love between close friends or siblings. Despite this shift in emotions, she expressed that she did not desire a divorce and believed it would be best for us to remain married. This way, our combined insurances could cover her pregnancies, and I could raise Jake's children. The letter outlined changes for the future, including spending nights at Jake's place and him spending nights at our place. It suggested I find alternative accommodations on those nights, possibly by considering a third job to keep busy while they were together. She mentioned that love-making relations between us would no longer occur, as Jake insisted on exclusivity, and I no longer excited her. Acknowledging the potential for anger and contemplation of divorce, the letter warned of the legal consequences, assuring me that pursuing divorce would result in securing retirement benefits, half of my paycheck, and child support. Despite recognizing the pain, the letter conveyed that a part of her was hurting too. She and Jake decided to take the cruise using the tickets I had purchased, blocking my number to prevent calls or texts. They planned to share pictures and videos to show what I was missing and ensure her safety. The letter concluded by stating that I had to go as the taxi was waiting, and she was meeting Jake at the airport. They opted to leave a day early for a less tiring start to their cruise. She promised to contact me upon their return, and I could pick her up again. The letter expressed regret, but stated that this was the way things had to be from now on. It was signed, "Your friend, Kelly." I sat in shock as the letter slipped from my hand. Friend? What was that about? With a friend like Kelly who needed enemies? I pondered. Yes, things had seemed off these past months, but I thought it was due to my schedule. That's why I invested in that cruise. The more I mulled over that letter, the angrier I became. I yanked the ring off my finger and hurled it across the room. To hell with her and her ridiculous notions. If she believed I would sit here and accept this, she was out of her mind. I glanced at the clock, 3 a.m. With only 5 hours until my day job, I knew I'd get just a few hours of sleep. Contemplating sleeping in the bed, thoughts of her with this Jake guy flooded my mind. Opting for the couch, I grabbed a pillow and an Afghan and lay down, too exhausted to stay awake. I drifted off, only to wake the next day wondering why I was on the couch. Reality hit when I remembered the previous night. Checking my phone, I hoped for a message deeming it a joke, but sadly, that wasn't the case. Dragging myself to the bathroom, I showered, dressed, and hastily grabbed a cup of coffee for the road. Attempting to set aside personal problems at work proved challenging, especially listening to others complain about perceived issues. Though I did my best, colleagues noticed my distracted state. After lunch, my supervisor, Wanda, called me into her office, a signal that there was an issue. She expressed genuine concern, motioning for me to close the door. Wanda inquired about my well-being, asking if everything was okay at home, and suggesting that I consider quitting the fast food job since I was already working 2 jobs. After a moment of consideration, I decided to open up about my situation. I confessed to Wanda that everything was not okay at home. Trusting her previous openness, I felt she deserved to know the details. She asked me to share, and in response, I retrieved the letter Kelly left and handed it over. Wanda read the letter, and when she finished, she returned it, shaking her head. She empathetically stated that we needed me to have my head completely in the game at work. She mentioned hearing from some colleagues who informed her about my short-tempered and snippy behavior that morning. After reading the letter, she expressed understanding of the challenges I was facing. Realizing I had vacation scheduled for the next week, she suggested I take the rest of the day off with comp time. Additionally, she offered to refer me to someone and wrote down the name and number of the attorney she used in her divorce. Handing me the information, she mentioned that she had been in a similar situation and encouraged me to give the attorney a call, informing her that Wanda recommended her. Grateful for the advice, I expressed my thanks, and she encouraged me to take the next week to sort things out and return with a clear mind. She added a light-hearted comment, saying, "And remember, there's lots of fish out there," to which I acknowledged, "I hear you, Wanda." I thanked her again, and then I shut down my desk, informing my cube-mate that I would be back in a week or so. He waved as I left. Upon reaching my car, I retrieved the note Wanda provided and dialed the number. The receptionist at the law offices of Hawkins and Bledsoe answered, inquiring about the purpose of my call. I requested to speak with Linda Hawkins, mentioning that Wanda Green had recommended her to me. The receptionist placed me on hold and returned after a couple of minutes, informing me that Miss Hawkins was scheduled to be in court that afternoon, but had an open slot at 4 p.m. She asked if that would work for me, and I confirmed that it would be perfect. I inquired about the office location, and after jotting down the address, I thanked the receptionist and ended the call. Checking the time, I realized I had enough time to visit the travel agency where Kelly worked. I hoped to intervene and, if possible, seek a refund for our plans. Upon reaching the agency, parking the car and entering, the 4 other women in the main office glanced up, their expressions hinting at their awareness of the situation. I approached the front desk where Julie, the receptionist, sat. She greeted me, and I stated my intention to see Kelly. Glancing around, Julie informed me that Kelly wasn't present that day. She handed me a large envelope, explaining that Kelly had informed them that I knew and asked her to give me the envelope if I came in. The other women wore smirks, leaving me uncertain about how much they knew. Upon opening the envelope, I was hit by the mixture of Kelly's scent, urine, and an unfamiliar odor. Inside, I found a pair of her soaking wet underwear folded up. Repulsed, I used a pencil to inspect further and discovered her rings covered in a white, gooey substance, unmistakably Jake's seed fluid. At the bottom of the envelope, there was also a USB drive. Disgusted, I confronted Julie, who smirked. As I looked around, I noticed the other women doing the same. I asked if they found it funny, and Julie, embarrassed, looked away. She explained that the thumb drive contained pictures and videos from a bon voyage party they had organized for Kelly and Jake the previous afternoon, with Kelly suggesting that I would enjoy them. An older woman emerged from the back and leaned against the front office wall, observing me. She informed me that Kelly and Jake had already left and that everyone at the agency was aware of their relationship. When I asked if they approved of it, she shrugged and asked what I wanted. I stated my desire for a refund, explaining that I had paid for the cruise and wanted my money back since I didn't have the tickets. She replied that the tickets were non-refundable and mentioned that it was nice of me to let Kelly put one in Jake's name. I disputed that claim, asserting that what Kelly did was fraudulent and insisted on getting my money back. However, she refused, saying it wouldn't happen. In frustration, I declared that I would take legal action, suing the agency and everyone involved. As I turned to leave, Julie stopped me, apologizing for the situation and explaining that Kelly had led them to believe I approved of her actions. She urged me to let Kelly have the cruise, emphasizing that there would be other opportunities. Curious about Julie's relationship status, I asked if she was married, and she responded negatively. I then expressed the pain of being betrayed by someone claiming to love me, and warned her of the potential future pain she might experience. I emphasized my disdain for Kelly and left with a harsh message for Julie to relay. I told Julie to inform Kelly that I hated her and never wanted to see her again. I added a shocking statement, expressing the hope that she rots and dies of AIDS. Julie and the others appeared shocked, and I concluded by announcing my intention to see them all in court before leaving before anyone could respond. With a couple of hours before my appointment at Linda's office, I parked in a shady spot at a park and took a nap in my car after setting my phone's clock. Reflecting on the lack of justice in the world, I asked myself, is there no justice in the world? The nap provided some relief, but my neck felt stiff and sore when I sat up in the driver's seat. After sipping lukewarm coffee, I started the car. Upon reaching the building housing Linda's office, I checked my appearance in the mirror. I looked worn out. Attempting to tidy my hair, I grabbed Kelly's letter and the envelope from Julie before heading inside. In the office, a pleasant blonde receptionist took my name and directed me to a seat. She offered a cup of fresh coffee, which I gratefully accepted. A few minutes later, she led me to Linda's office and closed the door behind me. Linda Hawkins, older than me but still quite attractive, stood up and extended her hand, which I accepted. She greeted me, expressing pleasure in meeting me, and suggested I have a seat. I thanked her and took a seat, responding that she could call me Sam. She acknowledged with a slight smile and encouraged me to address her as Linda, asking about the purpose of my visit. I informed her that I wanted to explore the possibility of getting a divorce. Linda questioned my reason, and I explained that my wife was cheating on me. To emphasize the gravity of the situation, I handed her the letter Kelly had left for me. Linda read the letter, frowning as she did so, and then handed it back to me. Inquiring about the envelope, I passed it to her, cautioning her about its contents. She opened it, reacting with a contorted face due to the unpleasant odor. After closing it back up, she handed it to me and expressed understanding, stating that she didn't blame me for wanting a divorce. She asked about my goals in the divorce, to which I asserted that I wanted essentially everything. I revealed a desire for her to face consequences for her actions, noting not only the infidelity, but also the agency's involvement in defrauding me of more than $2,000. She acknowledged my lack of knowledge about divorce laws and mentioned that the family court system in the state prioritizes economics over justice. Linda, expressing gratitude for the recommendation, explained that having no children was advantageous in divorce proceedings, as divorce is often hardest on children. When I mentioned that we were renting a one-bedroom apartment and working extra to save for a down payment on a house, Linda noted that it was one less thing to deal with. She inquired about my wife's employment at AA Travel Agency, asking about her income. I disclosed that she earned about the same as my base pay, approximately $800 an hour. Linda explained that the court might order me to provide support for a couple of years unless she remarried, and we would likely have to split all assets, including any retirement plans. Regarding her infidelity, Linda clarified that it couldn't be mentioned in the papers due to the state being a no-fault state. However, it might be used in negotiations. When asked about counseling, I expressed that I had not considered it, as there was no way to move past the situation. Linda mentioned that the court might still order counseling, and I inquired about the threat of my wife bringing her lover into the apartment. Linda inquired about my wife's ability to bring people into the apartment, asking if her name was on the lease, and I confirmed that it was. She explained that unless there were threats of damage, there was nothing I could do to prevent her from inviting people into the apartment, as she lived there as well. I expressed frustration at the situation, and Linda acknowledged that divorce is challenging, describing it as something one gets. I chuckled at her comment. Linda suggested that my wife might have a change of heart upon her return and reconsider the marriage. She proposed the idea of a legal separation to allow for a cooling down period, and if I still wanted a divorce after that, we could proceed. Linda also advised me to consider quitting the second job, as earning more money could lead to increased financial demands. She noted that I seemed to have been overextending myself for a while. Expressing my frustration, I asked about getting a refund for the cruise. Linda assured me that we could explore options to address that issue. We discussed the particulars, and Linda made notes as we talked. When we finished, she handed me a checklist of things to do, most of it dealing with the bank. I shook her hand and left, stopping at the front desk to leave a retainer on my way out. I still felt like crap about the whole situation, but at least I was doing something about it. I considered quitting the second job. It was wearing me out anyway, so I decided to go in and talk to the manager tomorrow and give my notice. On the way home, I stopped at the bank and made the changes Linda suggested. I paid off the joint credit card Kelly had and canceled it. Then I emptied out half of all our joint accounts and put it into the separate account I had already set up for the bonuses and commissions. Kelly didn't have access to that account anyway, so I figured it would be safe. I had planned to use that money for a house, but those plans were out the window. I got home, grabbed the mail out of the mailbox, then ate some leftover meatloaf Kelly had made a few days earlier. She had a habit of cooking large dishes, then freezing what we didn't eat for later. It took a while to thaw, but that was okay by me. I sat down with my dinner and looked through the mail, mostly junk, crap, and advertised fluids addressed to occupant or resident, except for one piece that looked like a handwritten invitation with detailed calligraphy addressed to me personally from something called Ramnusha Gallery. I never heard of it and nearly tossed it as well, but I felt compelled to open it. What I found was an invitation to a private art showing. I wasn't sure if this was something Kelly signed me up for or not. She had always tried to get me interested in the arts, but I frankly just didn't have much time with my work schedule. The invitation said I should be there at 9:30 a.m., sharp. As I looked at the invitation, I felt as though this was something I needed to do. Don't ask me to explain it. I put the invitation on the refrigerator door with a magnet and decided to go. If nothing else, it might take my mind off my problems for a bit. I wore a pair of latex gloves and opened the envelope provided by Julie earlier. Overcoming the unpleasant smell emanating from its contents, I retrieved the underwear, noticing the ring resting in the wettest section. Placing them in a plastic sandwich bag, I sealed it tightly. I wiped down the USB drive with drinks, uncertain if it would make a difference, but opting for caution given the enclosed items. Setting up my laptop, I inserted the drive, anticipating I might not appreciate its contents, and my intuition proved correct. The folder contained pictures featuring Kelly alongside a man, presumably Jake, enjoying drinks and socializing with office friends. Jake's hands were prominently on her in the photos, and the other girls wore smiles. More images depicted Jake's closeness, while other girls, even their supervisor, watched. The penultimate picture showed Kelly over a toilet bowl, undressed, with two girls holding her underwear, one of them being Julie. In the underwear midst were her rings, the ones I had placed on her finger almost 5 years ago. Examining the photos, I could discern a stream of urine soaking the undergarment and the gold rings. The final picture portrayed Kelly still undressed over the toilet, underwear and rings underneath her, smiling into the camera as she waved. The others joined in, smiling and waving with her. I had never felt so humiliated in my life. Soon after, a surge of something else overwhelmed me: hatred. At that moment, I despised her with every fiber of my being. Exiting that folder, I explored another containing several video files. Reluctantly previewing them, I was more focused on hearing what she and the others had to say rather than witnessing her with this individual. I reached the last video, curious about the reason behind her actions of urinating on her rings. Starting the video, I observed her adjusting herself over the bowl as others brought in the underwear. Kelly removed her rings as Julie and another girl extended her underwear beneath. They handed her rings to the older woman, who carefully placed them on the garment to prevent them from falling into the toilet. Jake inquired if she was ready, and Kelly, expressing a need to use the bathroom, looked directly into the camera, stating her intentions and expressing her feelings towards our marriage. She instructed one of the girls to bring in the envelope, emphasizing the inclusion of photos and videos. Kelly directed Julie to ensure that I receive the envelope if I come by the next day. Julie agreed to do so, and Kelly bid me farewell, waving along with the others. After the waves, Jake turned to the camera, assuring that he would take care of Kelly in my absence, and making a derogatory comment about me paying for everything. The video concluded, leaving me with a nauseating feeling. Wasn't typically a violent man, but at that moment, I wanted to eliminate the lot of them with my bare hands and feed the pieces to the dogs. I put my head in my hands for a bit. I was too shaken and angry to cry. All I wanted to do was lash out and hurt someone. Something, anything would do. I couldn't for the life of me understand why she would do this to me. I had never cheated on her, never hurt her in any way. All I ever did was work so that we could have a good life together. All she had to do was tell me I was working too many hours and I would have cut back, but she didn't. I had a thought and pulled up the agency's website. I found it was part of a much larger organization based out of New York and had offices across the country. So I looked and found an email address for the CEO and the chairman of the board. I wrote an email threatening a lawsuit and attached copies of the video, then sent it off. I looked around and saw the pictures of Kelly and me on the end tables and on the wall. I lost it and tore them all down, ripping her image out of every one of them. I was looking for something else to destroy when I heard the doorbell ring. Who is that? I wondered. I looked through the peephole and saw Julie with another woman from Kelly's office. I couldn't remember her name at the moment I opened the door. I growled at them and they jumped back, shocked at my anger. Julie begged to talk, and I questioned their motives, expressing my reluctance to hear anything they had to say. Julie asked if they could come inside, and I pulled out my phone to start a voice recording. Opening the door, I let them in and sat down on the couch, demanding to know the reason for their visit. When asked if they could have something to drink, I declined, urging them to say what they came to say and leave. Julie exchanged nervous glances with the others before conveying that she had talked to Kelly earlier, who was very upset. I responded indifferently and sarcastically, suggested that they could make it up to me by drastic actions. They stared at me in shock, and Julie protested that I couldn't mean such things, reminding me that Kelly was my wife. In response, I handed her the letter Kelly left for me. Julie read it, and after returning it to me, she apologized. I accused them of being complicit in Kelly's actions and criticized their behavior in the video. Julie apologized again, stating that Kelly misled them into thinking I was okay with it. Expressing my dissatisfaction, I told them it was time to leave. After a while, they turned for the door, but Julie turned back before leaving, suggesting that she could help me get over this. I dismissed the idea, emphasizing that I couldn't trust her, and urged them to leave and never return. They left, and I locked the door behind them. Later, I decided to drown my sorrows. I drove to the convenience store on the corner, purchased a 6-pack of beer and a couple of packs of cigarettes. I had quit drinking and smoking when we got married, but I decided to hell with it. Upon my return, I sat on the balcony, drank my beer, and ended up smoking several cigarettes before deciding to turn in for the night. The next day, I got up, showered, washed the beer and cigarette taste out of my mouth, dressed, and headed out. Looking online, I got directions to the gallery and realized I had just about enough time to get there by 9:30, so I headed out. After making a cup of coffee for the road, I pulled up to the Victorian house at the address on the invitation and was a bit surprised to see no other cars. Surely others would have been invited to this showing, I thought. Exiting the car, I approached the door. Before I could knock, it swung open, revealing a petite blonde woman in her early 20s. She greeted me as Mr. Carmichael, mentioning that I was right on time. Introducing herself as Dr. Adrestia Ramnusha, she extended her hand, and I shook it. She confirmed that I was the only one attending the meeting and guided me into a room with a covered portrait on an easel. Instructing me to take a seat, she uncovered the portrait, cautioning that it might be shocking. As she lifted the cover, I saw a painting of Kelly lying in a strange bed with Jake beside her. Dr. Ramnusha apologized and covered the portrait again. I questioned how she obtained the painting and whether Kelly was behind this, expressing my lack of a museed fluid. She clarified that Kelly had not put her up to it and suggested we go to her office for an explanation. I followed her upstairs into an office filled with old books and scrolls. She pointed to a chair in front of her cluttered desk, instructing me to sit while she made tea. Confused about how tea could make the situation better, I sat down, still in shock. Dr. Ramnusha handed me a cup of tea, ensuring that I drank it. Strangely, I began to feel a bit better after a few sips. She smiled and sat down at her desk, and I demanded an explanation for what was happening. She nodded and explained that she helps people like me get justice. She had been watching my wife for some time and became actively involved after Kelly wrote the letter to me. She asked if I had any idea about what was going on, and I admitted that I didn't. I interrogated how she found out about the letter, questioning if she was trailing or spying on us and if she was a private investigator. She replied that she wasn't precisely a private investigator, but explained that overseeing all marriages was her expertise for many years. She asked me to watch a video on the monitor, which appeared to be taken in my apartment. The video showed Kelly writing the letter at the kitchen table, and below it, words scrolled through, reflecting Kelly's thoughts as she wrote. The words revealed her intention to prevent me from filing for divorce and her plan to counter by citing cruelty or misuse, as advised by Jake. I asked about the words below the video, and Adrestia explained that they were Kelly's thoughts as she wrote the letter. I questioned how it was possible, and she simply stated that it was proprietary. I asserted that Kelly's claim of misuse was a lie, as I had never done anything like that. Adrestia acknowledged that she knew, but unfortunately in this state, the court would be more inclined to believe Kelly than me, and she was aware of that fact. I remarked that my lawyer didn't mention the details Adrestia shared. She acknowledged that lawyers in the system were the real winners in divorces, and emphasized that seeking justice or fair treatment was futile. Adrestia revealed that Kelly had informed Jake about her plan during a video on the monitor, showing them snuggling together in plane seats. Jake asked if she left the letter for me, and she admitted to it. He predicted my reaction and questioned what she would do when I filed for divorce. She responded that her lawyer would claim I smack and misused her, even though she didn't mention it in the letter. The video ended, leaving me stunned. Expressing disbelief, I questioned how she could fabricate such a story without consequences. Adrestia explained that people pull off such things all the time. I then expressed confusion about Kelly's motives, highlighting my faithfulness, consistent provision, and hard work for our future. Adrestia suggested that perhaps I'd been too focused on finances and not spending enough time with her, though she clarified that it didn't justify Kelly's actions. I mentioned that Kelly could have communicated with me, and I would have given up the second job if I knew this would happen. Adrestia responded that it was no assurance this wouldn't have occurred anyway. I inquired about her suggestions for my course of action. She proposed assisting me in seeking some form of justice and asked if I would be open to that. I affirmed my willingness, seeking more details on how it could be done. Adrestia reminded me of my notion from the previous night, wearing a mischievous grin. Perplexed, I asked what she was referring to. She maintained the mischievous smile, rose from behind her desk, and approached me. Taking my hand, she signaled for me to stand and mentioned that their ship had already sailed early that morning. I acknowledged that I knew, having paid for the cruise. Adrestia agreed, suggesting that we should pay them a visit. Astonished, I wondered how we could accomplish that. She smiled as she held my hand. Suddenly, we found ourselves standing on the deck of a massive cruise ship. I glanced around and saw a few people on the deck, but I did spot Kelly and the idiot standing by the railing. She wore a tiny two-piece bikini that left little to the imagination. They were locked in an embrace, and Kelly was caressing the front of his suit. I cleared my throat to get their attention. Kelly expressed surprise and questioned how I got there and who was with me. I responded, stating that I represented Justice and was there to ensure she paid for what she had done to her husband. Kelly and Jake chuckled at my statement. In a threatening tone, Jake demanded to know what I intended to do. As they started walking toward us, they slipped on something, lost their balance, and tumbled over the railing. I rushed to the railing, and Adrestia joined me. We peered over the railing, and Adrestia restrained me. Initially, I didn't comprehend why. Just as they descended about 15 feet, the largest shark I could ever imagine emerged from the water, its mouth wide open, revealing rows of large, jagged teeth. The mouth of this creature had to be easily 30 feet wide. I couldn't recall ever feeling so terrified. As I looked, Kelly screamed loudly, her eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, both she and Jake were in the shark's mouth. The monster closed its mouth, sending geysers of blood back up to the deck. Then it silently slipped back under the water. I heard cries from the deck and observed other passengers vomiting on the deck. Some had phones out, likely recording videos. Adrestia pulled me back, and I heard klaxons blaring. Crew members hurried to the railing to assess if there was anything salvageable, but it was too late. Adrestia grabbed my hand, and suddenly we were back in her office. I felt nauseated, but she swiftly held my head in her hands, and the nausea subsided almost immediately. I expressed shock and inquired if the events genuinely happened. Adrestia seated me back in the chair and poured another cup of tea. She confirmed that it did happen, handing me the tea and suggesting that it would help. I took a sip of the tea and immediately felt much improved. I was still grappling with what I had just witnessed, but the sense of shock had dissipated. Simultaneously, I noticed something else. I felt no remorse whatsoever, no sadness, nothing. I felt nothing for what transpired with Kelly and Jake. I looked at Adrestia, seeking answers. Adrestia informed me that the tea provided would help me cope with the situation, and indeed, I felt much better after finishing it. Despite the fact that I was once deeply in love with Kelly, there was an absence of sadness over her demise, leading me to question my emotions. Addressing my concern, Adrestia reassured me not to worry about any lack of emotion, attributing it to a side effect of the tea that numbs negative emotions. Curious about Kelly's whereabouts, I inquired, acknowledging that I understood she was deceased. Adrestia acknowledged my religious upbringing, noting that I likely wondered about the afterlife. She invited me to follow her back to the showroom where she had unveiled the portrait. There, she uncovered the painting, revealing a drastic change. The portrait now depicted her face frozen in fear, her eyes wide, her mouth open in an eternal scream. Behind her face was the shark's maw, row after row of sharp teeth, awaiting her. Adrestia gestured towards the painting, stating that it represented where Kelly was now, forever captured in her final moments. She explained that Kelly would spend eternity in that portrayal, regretting her decision to wrong me, a sort of self-made hell. As she hung the portrait on a vacant spot of the wall, among rows of similar paintings, Adrestia revealed that all the individuals depicted were cheaters, each one regretting their decisions for eternity. I expressed my realization, and she confirmed, emphasizing that this was her concept of justice. She had been carrying out this work for a significant period, and the walls were not even halfway filled. Curious about the duration of her endeavor, I inquired, and Adrestia responded that she had been engaged in this work for a longer time than I could imagine, expressing a sense of sadness. She took my head in her hands and looked at me intently. For a moment, I thought I saw a tear in her eye. Adrestia mentioned that the upcoming days would be challenging, but assured me that she would always be with me, residing in my heart regardless of age. She encouraged me to go on and live a long life, suggesting the possibility of finding a new love, as she believed someone was waiting for me. After a kiss on the cheek, I felt content, and even now, I can't fully explain the feeling. She accompanied me to the door and closed it behind me. After I left, shaken, I drove to my second job and turned in my notice. The manager wasn't too upset, but he understood and wished me well. We left on a good note, and he said he would have my final check mailed to me. I drove back home, grabbed a beer, and sat in front of the television. For a while, I thought it strange that I still didn't feel any remorse over Kelly's demise. I turned on the television and found that the video of the shark incident had already made the news. It turned out that several people had taken video of what happened. As I flipped through the channels, I saw that several news programs were already talking about the feasibility that such a large beast could exist. All of the reports said they were still waiting for the identity of the sufferers to be released. Going online, I found that video of the shark had also gone viral on social media. It was everywhere: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. I couldn't watch the video, so I turned my computer off. I grabbed a pile of trash bags and went through the apartment, collecting all of Kelly's things. Before long, I had everything packed up and stuffed in her car. I called her mother and told her that she needed to come get it. "Why, Sam?" she asked. I told her about Kelly's cheating, but didn't tell her about Kelly getting eaten by a giant shark. She was understandably upset and said her and Kelly's father would be by to pick it all up later that day. They came by that afternoon and left. After making a tearful plea to patch things up with her, I made it clear that no reconciliation was possible. I still didn't tell them about her getting eaten. I figured they would learn about that soon enough. After they left, I dressed and went to a bar and grill where I consumed a juicy burger and several beers. I got through the rest of the weekend somehow and woke up late Monday since I was technically on vacation. I sat in front of the television with a bowl of cereal as a news report came on saying the offices of AA Travel Agency had been destroyed by fire. According to the report, everyone got out okay, but just barely an hour or so later, I got a call from Julie, who was more than a bit shaken up. She informed me about the office burning down, recounting the strange incident where Kelly's desk spontaneously caught fire. They narrowly escaped the flames. She mentioned receiving a peculiar text from Kelly just before the fire, containing references to sharks and the hounds of hell. Julie expressed confusion about the message, to which I replied that I had no idea. The conversation ended, and I sat back smiling to myself. I took a drive to see Adrestia and ask her about the fire, but the Victorian mansion that housed her gallery was gone. I sat there and looked at the empty lot, wondering what happened. After a while, I shook my head and drove home. Update. After a couple of weeks, I received word from the cruise line about Kelly's demise. They conveyed the news of her passaway and included a check covering the cost of my tickets, along with the payout from the accidental passaway and dismemberment policy linked to the tickets. I reached out to Linda, informing her that our separation was no longer necessary. While she offered condolences, they held no significance for me. A few weeks later, the travel agency's headquarters contacted me. They proposed a substantial sum of money in exchange for my silence and a commitment not to pursue legal action. Additionally, they revealed that the entire office where Kelly worked had been terminated, with considerations for a new team in their revamped office. After contemplating their offer, I decided to accept it. Kelly's parents organized a memorial service for their daughter, but I opted not to attend or send flowers. Although they were displeased, they acknowledged my feelings. Life continued, and it took quite some time before I resumed dating. With the elimination of my second job, I began frequenting the gym to regain fitness. The effort paid off, attracting attention from several women at my workplace. While I went on a few dates, I refrained from committing to a relationship. It took a couple of years before I felt ready to trust another woman at that level. Eventually, I found someone, Marcy, a coworker who went through a divorce after discovering her husband in their marital bed. We've been dating for a while now, and I'm seriously contemplating proposing to her. All in all, life is looking up. Dora Adrestia moved on to the next case that came her way. One day, however, she sat down at her desk and took a long look at everything, the pain, the anguish, and the pleas for help. Overwhelmed, she put her head in her hands and did something she hadn't done for 2 millennia. She wept.
Story 3.
The story of Marvin and Cheryl began like many others, two young hearts full of promise and excitement for a shared future. They were college sweethearts who, despite their contrasting personalities, complemented each other in ways that seemed destined. Marvin, a driven and detail-oriented businessman, brought stability to their partnership, while Cheryl, with her free-spirited and vibrant nature, infused their life with spontaneity and joy. Their love was marked by a blend of passion and shared dreams that, for many years, created a harmonious rhythm. As the years passed, however, the strains of life began to etch their marks on their relationship. Career advancements, parenting responsibilities, and the inevitable challenges of aging shifted their focus away from each other. Moments of connection grew fewer, replaced by routines and unspoken grievances. What had once been a vibrant partnership started to feel like a transactional cohabitation, with both Marvin and Cheryl questioning what remained of the love that had once brought them together. The first mandatory marriage counseling session in Marvin and Cheryl's divorce process was scheduled for this week. Marvin attended alone, convinced it was pointless because Cheryl's rigid commitment to independence left no room for compromise. During the session, the counselor, Diane Marco, began with a direct question. "Do you love your wife?" "Absolutely," Marvin replied. "And does she love you?" Diane pressed. "She says she does," Marvin responded. "Then why are you divorcing?" "She left, took all her things, and asked for no contact for 6 months," Marvin explained. "She wants to live like she's single and date other men. That doesn't sound like someone who wants to stay married." When asked how he felt, Marvin's irritation flared. "How do you think I feel? I love her and would never hurt her. She's a good person, just lost in her own confusion. But she's heading down a dangerous path, thinking it'll all work out. If she's set on leaving, I'll move on, even if it hurts." Diane then brought up Valentine's Day. Marvin sighed. "I went all out. Roses, fancy chocolates, a $200 dinner. She gave me a card she didn't even write herself and a quick kiss before turning her back to me. That's when I realized I'd lost her." By week 7, Cheryl came to Diane's office. Asked the same questions, she echoed Marvin's account but saw things differently. "I don't want a divorce," Cheryl insisted. "I told Marvin I'd come back in 6 months. I just need freedom to do what I missed out on when I was younger. Is that so unreasonable?" Diane pushed further. "Can you let go of the idea of dating other men to save your marriage?" Cheryl was unmoved. "I'll be back as a better version of myself. Marvin will love me more after this time apart." Meanwhile, Marvin had thrown himself into other obligations, like his role on the junior college alumni board. One day, he met with Tara Wilson, the executive director, to discuss an upcoming fundraiser. Tara, a striking and vibrant woman, greeted him warmly. After their business discussion, she hesitated before saying, "I heard about your divorce. It's tough. I've been there. Are you two still in touch?" "No," Marvin replied. "She needs time to figure herself out, and I'm respecting that. No infidelity, no major issues, just diverging paths." Tara shifted gears. "This might be awkward, but I need a favor. There's a formal charity dinner Saturday, and I need a companion to keep a particularly unpleasant sponsor from bothering me. Would you go with me?" "If it's too much, I understand." Marvin agreed with a slight smile. "I'll be your date. Tuxedo, right?" Tara took his hand, not formally, but as a friend, and said, "Thank you so much." The canceled trip to Paris lingered in Cheryl's thoughts, a reminder of how Marvin's occasional romantic gestures often clashed with his failure to consider her desires. While he could be thoughtful at times, she wished for more attention to her own wants. Meanwhile, she had formed a casual bond with a barista at Starbucks. Their lunches hinted at deeper possibilities, but Cheryl decided it wasn't yet the time to take things further. For now, infidelity felt premature. On Saturday evening, Marvin arrived at Tara's home, his BMW gleaming and his tuxedo tailored to perfection. The door was opened by her teenage son, who politely ushered him inside. While they exchanged a few friendly remarks, Tara entered the room, transforming the atmosphere. Her cobalt blue dress and effortless poise left Marvin momentarily stunned. She looked far removed from the professional colleague he had worked with before, exuding elegance that took him by surprise. Composing himself, Marvin escorted her to the car, determined to make the evening memorable. At the charity gala, Tara commanded attention as they walked in, her beauty drawing admiring glances from every corner of the room. Marvin, fully aware of the attention she garnered, found himself quietly enjoying the role of her escort. While Tara engaged in lively conversations, Marvin kept an eye on the crowd, particularly Patrick O'Kelly, a man notorious for his unwelcome advances. When O'Kelly approached Tara, Marvin stepped in decisively, positioning himself between them and deflecting the interaction with effortless charm. Together, Marvin and Tara navigated the evening with ease, creating a natural partnership that kept O'Kelly and others at bay. The event was a success, and Marvin found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Over dinner, he entertained the table with his wit, rediscovering the side of himself that thrived in social settings. When the orchestra began to play, he invited Tara to dance. They moved with a shared rhythm through lively songs, and when a slower tune started, their connection deepened. Tara, sensing Marvin's lingering hurt, gently offered her support, sharing her own experiences of overcoming similar struggles. Her warmth and understanding struck a chord, offering him a glimmer of reassurance. As the evening wound down, Tara requested a late-night drive in Marvin's convertible. The cool air invigorated her, and she leaned closer to him, finding comfort in his presence. At her door, she thanked him for a wonderful evening, leaving him with an unexpected sense of happiness. Marvin drove home with the top down, the cool night air doing little to mask the warmth he felt inside. Elsewhere, Cheryl ventured into a different kind of evening. Accompanied by her friend Patty, she visited a lively club, eager to immerse herself in a world she had long ignored. Patty, familiar with the scene, quickly attracted a group of men to their table, and Cheryl found herself enjoying the attention. She danced with Tim through upbeat songs, though she hesitated during a slow dance, unsure of how far she wanted to go. Still, the evening rejuvenated her confidence. Collecting a few phone numbers and relishing the admiration of strangers, Cheryl reminded herself of her allure and the freedom to choose her path. By the end of the night, she and Patty left alone, but Cheryl felt a renewed sense of self-assurance. On Wednesday morning, Cheryl's coworkers brought her the latest edition of the junior college's internal newsletter. The main feature was an article highlighting Tara Wilson's role in the success of a children's charity event held the previous Saturday. Several photographs accompanied the article, including one showing Tara with an unidentified man. Cheryl couldn't help but wonder if the man standing beside the strikingly attractive Tara might be her estranged husband. Staring at the image, Cheryl confirmed her suspicion when her colleagues pressed her. The realization left her stunned and introspective. By Thursday, Cheryl felt compelled to act and decided to visit Betty, who ran a local travel agency. Desperate to reconnect with her husband, Marvin, she asked Betty for help. Cheryl explained her predicament. Her children had stopped speaking to her, and she believed Marvin might persuade them to reach out. Betty, though reluctant to interfere, agreed to call Marvin and facilitate a conversation under specific conditions. Marvin, after some hesitation, agreed to speak with Cheryl, albeit with a sense of obligation rather than eagerness. Later that day, Cheryl and Marvin arranged to meet for lunch at a neutral location, Alberto's restaurant. Marvin made it clear he had no intention of visiting Cheryl's home, emphasizing boundaries that reflected the strain in their relationship. When Marvin arrived at the restaurant, Cheryl greeted him warmly, though their interaction was strained and awkward. Despite her attempt to lighten the mood with casual remarks about his appearance, Marvin responded with a biting comment about the attention he had been receiving from local women, some of whom regularly brought him meals. His dry humor stung Cheryl, especially when he casually mentioned one of her acquaintances, Mary DeFalco, who had visited him early on. Cheryl, visibly irritated, shifted the conversation to her children. She expressed her sadness over their silence and asked if Marvin had discouraged them from contacting her. Marvin denied this, explaining that he had advised them to respect her as their mother. However, he admitted that the children seemed to prefer visiting him, a reality that further deepened Cheryl's sense of isolation. Despite the tension, Marvin promised to ask the children to reach out, warning Cheryl that their words might not be kind. The discussion turned to a recent newspaper article featuring Marvin and Tara Wilson. Cheryl asked about their relationship, and Marvin explained that Tara had invited him as her date to the charity event. He spoke of the evening fondly, describing it as one of the most enjoyable nights he had experienced in a long time. Cheryl's questions revealed her discomfort, but Marvin remained straightforward, making it clear he appreciated Tara's company. Toward the end of their meeting, Cheryl brought up her financial struggles. She admitted to falling short on various expenses, including bills, insurance, and moving costs, and asked Marvin for a loan. Though visibly frustrated, Marvin eventually wrote her a check, handing it over without further discussion. Cheryl expressed her embarrassment, acknowledging that her plans for independence had not materialized as she had hoped. Before parting, Cheryl inquired about a trip to France she had heard Marvin had planned. He revealed that he had organized the trip for the two of them, knowing it was a lifelong dream of hers. However, he had canceled it after she decided to leave, a revelation that brought Cheryl to the brink of tears. She expressed gratitude for his thoughtfulness, calling it the most selfless gesture she had ever experienced. Cheryl reaffirmed her love for Marvin and her hope that they might reconcile in the future. With the conversation concluded, Marvin left the restaurant, paying the bill on his way out. Cheryl remained behind, reflecting on their strained interaction and the many unresolved issues between them. Later that afternoon, Marvin reached out to Tara to ask if she was available to go out with him on Friday night. Tara responded enthusiastically, confirming she was free and curious about his plans for the evening. Marvin proposed a casual outing, attending the junior college baseball games. He suggested they enjoy the spring weather, grab a meal at the park, and watch the games together. Tara thought it was a fantastic idea and offered to secure seats in the faculty box. However, Marvin declined, explaining he wanted to keep the evening relaxed and not make it feel like work for her. They agreed to meet at 4 p.m. When Friday arrived, Marvin chose seats on the third base side of the field. The evening began with sodas and popcorn, setting a lighthearted tone. As they settled in, Marvin admitted he wasn't sure if Tara enjoyed outdoor activities or sports, but he decided to take a chance. Tara reassured him, revealing her love for sports and her past experience playing softball in high school and college. She appreciated the thoughtfulness behind the outing, mentioning it was her first time attending a game since moving to town 2 years earlier. The conversation shifted to Tara's son, who was considering trying golf despite logistical challenges due to her demanding job. Marvin suggested a summer program at his country club tailored for young golfers. He detailed the schedule, which included golf lessons, playtime on the course, and pool activities, emphasizing how enjoyable and structured it was for kids. Tara was intrigued but concerned about the cost. Marvin explained the program was free except for food cost and offered to sponsor her membership temporarily. Touched by his generosity, Tara expressed her gratitude. As the evening unfolded, the pair watched 2 entertaining baseball games, sharing hot dogs and popcorn. They laughed and talked effortlessly, reminiscing about their younger days. Marvin had even brought a blanket, not just for warmth, but as an excuse to sit closer to Tara, who seemed perfectly comfortable with the gesture. Their evening concluded with a warm hug, a brief kiss, and plans to meet again the following week. By Sunday of week 10, the country club's golf course was abuzz with activity for the season's first tournament. Played in a scramble format, teams of 4 competed by selecting the best shot from each turn. Teams were balanced by skill levels, with Marvin categorized as a B-level player. To his surprise, Greta Gustafsson was the A-level player on his team. Greta, a former LPGA Tour player, was well known not only for her skill, but also for her striking appearance. At 5'5", with long blonde hair and an athletic build, she had been a favorite of photographers during her career. Originally from Sweden, she now owned the town's largest insurance agency, a business she had built using her tournament earnings and sponsorships. Her soft, melodic voice and confident demeanor captivated everyone she met. As the team introduced themselves, Marvin found himself paired with Greta in the cart. He mentioned recognizing her from the club's annual meetings where he had given the president's report. Greta acknowledged him with a warm smile, remarking that it was nice to finally meet. During the game, Greta's talent was on full display. Her powerful swing sent the ball soaring 250 yards down the fairway, drawing admiration from the team. Marvin, impressed, complimented her in Swedish, a nod to his ancestral roots. Greta was both surprised and delighted, realizing Marvin could speak her native language, albeit modestly. She shared that he was the first person in town who knew anything about Sweden, sparking a connection between them. The rest of the game was filled with laughter, stories, and even singing Swedish nursery rhymes. Marvin, recalling songs his grandmother had taught him, added a humorous touch by admitting he didn't know their meanings. Greta's long drives and Marvin's consistent putting helped their team secure first place, winning $100 in prizes for each member. After the tournament, Greta turned to Marvin with a playful grin, telling him she'd had more fun golfing with him than winning. She suggested they play together again, and Marvin agreed, proposing a midweek game followed by dinner. Their friendly banter and shared cultural connection hinted at the start of a promising friendship, or perhaps something more. Weeks 11 and 12 marked a significant shift for Cheryl, as she reluctantly decided to attend her sorority's 25th graduation reunion. Initially resistant, Cheryl only agreed after persistent encouragement and some tough love from her friends, who recognized her struggles with Marvin and her ongoing effort to redefine herself as a modern, independent woman. They hoped this weekend would offer her both support and a renewed sense of confidence. The 3-hour drive to Dallas was a welcome reprieve for Cheryl, allowing her time to reflect on her life, her college years, and the friends she was about to reconnect with. She thought about how much their lives had evolved and anticipated the chance to catch up with the group, whose camaraderie had always been a source of comfort. The reunion was held in a luxurious corporate retreat, featuring 6 private bedrooms, each with its own bathroom, as well as a spacious central lounge, a full kitchen, and an outdoor patio complete with a hot tub overlooking a golf course. The weekend agenda was meticulously planned, with Friday set aside for travel and a casual evening together. The group had arranged dinner at a sushi restaurant, followed by a pajama party back at the retreat. Cheryl, having taken the day off, arrived by late afternoon to the sounds of laughter and squeals echoing from inside. Her arrival was met with enthusiastic cheers and the sight of a counter lined with liquor bottles, evidence of the lively atmosphere already in full swing. The Uber rides to and from the sushi dinner were chaotic and filled with laughter, setting the tone for the evening. Back at the retreat, the women gathered in their pajamas, margaritas in hand, for an open and candid discussion about their lives. Each shared updates about their careers, families, marriages, and romantic adventures, with stories ranging from uplifting to somber. Cheryl's narrative, still unfolding, was one of 3 left without resolution, prompting the group to speculate on the exciting or uncertain possibilities ahead for her. As the night progressed, many of the women, particularly those who had experienced divorce, rallied around Cheryl. They praised her for taking bold steps in her marriage, asserting her independence, and prioritizing her happiness. They admired her decision to live on her terms, temporarily separating from Marvin and enforcing a no-contact rule. However, when Cheryl revealed that Marvin had filed for divorce and seemed to be moving on with Tara Wilson, a younger, attractive woman, and a flashy new BMW, the mood shifted. Even the most assertive voices softened, cautioning her against pushing Marvin further into a decision she might regret. The women's collective advice was clear: proceed thoughtfully and protect her own interests. Saturday's plans kicked off late in the morning after a long night of bonding. The group spent the day shopping and enjoying a leisurely lunch before heading back to rest and prepare for the evening's activities. Dinner was booked at a popular Italian restaurant, followed by a night of clubbing. For fun, the group devised a Catcher of Men contest, with each woman donning her most alluring dress and contributing $20 to a pot. The woman deemed to have attracted the best man of the evening would take home the prize. Dinner was delightful, but the real energy of the night came at the club. Unable to find a single table for their large group, the women split into 2 smaller groups, which made it easier for them to mingle and dance. Cheryl danced with 5 men, each charming and entertaining, embodying the freedom and fun she had envisioned when she left Marvin's house. The 6th man, however, was different. His mere presence made Cheryl feel an inexplicable pull. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and exuded sophistication. Without hesitation, she rose to dance with him, captivated by his calm, focused demeanor. As they danced through a mix of fast and slow songs, their connection grew. Eventually, he asked her if she was tired and ready to return to her table. Cheryl, feeling emboldened, replied that she would only return if he joined her, otherwise preferring to stay in his arms. Amused and flattered, he suggested they move to his table instead, introducing her to his son and a group of college friends. He assured her they would have plenty of time to talk, as the young men were preoccupied with their own pursuits for the evening. Cheryl laughed, intrigued by his charm, and agreed, ready to see where the night would take her. Cheryl discovered that Ted was an airline broker based in Seattle, visiting Dallas to see his son Matt, who was interning there for the summer. Ted's job involved traveling the globe to buy and sell airplanes, a detail that immediately struck Cheryl as significant. Here was a man with no ties to her hometown and no connection to Marvin. For Cheryl, this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up, a chance to experience life with a man completely outside of her usual orbit. To keep it uncomplicated, she decided not to reveal her real name, ensuring there would be no trail back to her life with Marvin. Marvin often used a basketball phrase, "no harm, no foul," and Cheryl decided to adopt that logic for herself. If Marvin didn't know about her time with Ted, there could be no harm in it. Relaxed by this reasoning, Cheryl allowed herself to fully enjoy the evening. Their table became the hub of the party, with young men and women gathering to drink, laugh, and have fun. Ted, noticing the energy of their group, suggested they move somewhere more private before things got too wild. He asked Cheryl 2 questions: her name, to which she replied CJ, and her marital status, which she described as divorced. When Cheryl inquired about where he was staying, Ted revealed he was at the embassy suites and joked that he'd ask his son to find another room for the night. Without hesitation, Cheryl led Ted to her friends' tables, announcing their departure and jokingly having Ted show his driver's license to her friends as a precaution. Once at his hotel, the connection between Cheryl and Ted quickly intensified. They spent the night together, and by morning Cheryl returned to the retreat, where her friends eagerly pressed for details. While some envied her daring, others were relieved to avoid such complexities in their own lives. The weekend ended with a shared promise among the women to stay connected and plan more gatherings. But Cheryl's experiences stood out as the most talked about story. Week 13 brought a different kind of milestone. On Sunday, Marvin took Tara and her son Sean to his country club. After a leisurely breakfast, he gave Sean a tour, showing him the pro shop, driving range, and snack bar. He even provided Sean with an old set of golf clubs that his own son had used at the same age, leaving them in the shop for Sean to use whenever he came to play. Marvin went a step further, giving Sean his club number to use for ordering snacks, fostering a sense of belonging and independence for the boy. That Tuesday marked Sean's first day in the young golfer's summer program, and his excitement was palpable. What had once seemed like a dull summer now promised adventure, with golf lessons, course play, and swimming filling his days. Tara, seeing Sean's happiness, felt deeply grateful to Marvin. That evening, she prepared a heartfelt dinner for the 3 of them. After Sean went to bed, Tara thanked Marvin for his thoughtfulness, praising him for being such a positive influence in Sean's life. Marvin, though appreciative, confessed his lingering doubts about his own choices as a father and husband, admitting that the events of the past few months had left him feeling disoriented. Tara reassured him, drawing on her own experiences to remind him that clarity would come in time. She encouraged him to keep moving forward, assuring him that he would feel better no matter how things unfolded. Their conversation shifted to quiet companionship as they embraced and talked into the night. June 15th arrived with a heavy significance for both Marvin and Cheryl. It was their 25th wedding anniversary. The date loomed large on their calendars, marking not just their milestone, but the end of Cheryl's 6-month journey of self-discovery. It was decision day: reconcile as husband and wife, or finalize their divorce. Despite everything, neither sent a card or message to acknowledge the day, each lost in their own reflections. Cheryl, still basking in the glow of her Dallas trip, felt emboldened by her friend's support. The night with Ted had been exhilarating, a sharp contrast to the routine and constraints of her life in her hometown. Yet she also knew the importance of secrecy. Revealing anything about her escapade could jeopardize her marriage. Despite Marvin's filing for divorce, Cheryl wasn't ready to let go entirely. She wanted the freedom to live life on her terms while still keeping the stability of their marriage, a home to return to whenever she pleased. The situation was, in her mind, ideal. Marvin could remain unaware of her newfound independence, and she could enjoy her life as she saw fit. While Cheryl hated the dishonesty, she justified it by believing Marvin was overreacting. In her view, he simply needed to stop making everything so complicated. For Cheryl, this was her way of balancing the scales, even if it meant stepping into a morally gray area. On Wednesday, Marvin spent the afternoon on the golf course with Greta. With guidance from the club pro and Greta's patient tips, he managed to shave 6 strokes off his average score. Beyond the improvements to his game, Marvin enjoyed the peaceful outdoor setting and Greta's easygoing companionship. Though the competition was genuine, their conversation flowed naturally, growing more personal and relaxed as the game progressed. After their round, Marvin asked if Greta would join him on Friday for the Couples Club event, a casual evening of 9 holes followed by dinner and prizes. While the event was mostly attended by married couples, a few pairs like them also participated. Greta, smiling, agreed without hesitation. That same Friday evening, a long-standing group of women gathered at the country club for their usual drinks and dinner. Cheryl had once been a regular at these gatherings, but since Marvin had filed for divorce, her access to the club had become uncertain. Encouraged by her friend Betty, Cheryl decided to join despite her initial hesitation. She reasoned that avoiding Marvin was unnecessary. They weren't enemies, merely 2 people navigating a separation. Cheryl told herself that a modern, confident woman wouldn't shy away from such encounters. Their group's favorite spot was the lively patio overlooking the 9th green, a place chosen for its informal atmosphere and stunning views. The evening was perfect, with a cool breeze and vibrant conversation fueled by rounds of cosmopolitans. Cheryl felt a sense of nostalgia as she sat with her friends, recalling the many evenings she and Marvin had spent there together. Then she saw him. Marvin was walking briskly alongside a golf cart, heading toward his ball. He looked fit and confident, his athletic stride evident even from a distance. Cheryl noticed the position of his ball on the par 5 hole and realized he was close to a remarkable shot. As Marvin swung, the ball soared and rolled straight into the cup. Cheers erupted as someone shouted, "Eagle! He made an eagle!" Cheryl instinctively rose, ready to congratulate him. But she froze when a tall blonde woman, Greta, jumped out of the cart and ran to Marvin. Greta embraced him warmly and kissed him, indifferent to the onlookers. Marvin, unbothered by the attention, hugged her back, and they climbed into the cart together, laughing and chatting as they drove off. The women at Cheryl's table fell silent, their eyes on her. Cheryl grabbed her purse and hurried to her car. Once inside, she broke down, tears streaming as the weight of the moment hit her. Marvin's public connection with Greta left her grappling with the realization that she no longer held control over the timing of their potential reconciliation. The dynamic between them had shifted, and she now felt adrift. By week 14, Marvin and Cheryl were scheduled for a mediation session arranged by Diane Marcos. It was their first face-to-face meeting in 5 weeks. They arrived at Diane's office simultaneously, Cheryl complimenting Marvin's sleek BMW as they stepped out of their vehicles. Half-jokingly, she asked if he could give her a ride after the session, but Marvin declined, reminding her of their agreement to avoid unnecessary contact and citing his plans for an afternoon golf game. Inside, Diane greeted them warmly, noting their willingness to speak to each other as a promising sign. She reiterated that both had expressed love for one another and a desire to save their marriage, though Cheryl's need for independence and new experiences had become a significant obstacle. Diane framed the issue clearly. Marvin felt deeply hurt by the idea of Cheryl seeking physical connections with others, while Cheryl believed such experiences could help her feel more fulfilled as a partner. Cheryl began, her voice steady but earnest. She expressed her love and respect for Marvin, emphasizing her desire to remain married while also addressing her feelings of incompleteness. She explained her perspective on intimacy versus physical experiences, likening casual encounters to fleeting events like a handshake or even an illness, unpleasant but ultimately manageable. Cheryl hoped Marvin could understand her rationale and see her actions as a way to deepen their relationship rather than diminish it. Marvin took a long breath before responding. He acknowledged Cheryl's stated respect for him, but pointed out the contradiction in her actions. To him, her pursuit of other relationships felt demeaning and deeply offensive. The idea of her seeking fulfillment outside their marriage was a fundamental blow to his sense of trust and partnership. While Cheryl framed her desires as a step toward self-improvement and connection, Marvin struggled to reconcile those motivations with his own values and feelings of betrayal. Their conversation, raw and unfiltered, underscored the widening gulf between them, leaving the outcome of their reconciliation uncertain. Almost with defiance, Marvin stated his perspective on Cheryl's desires. He explained that her suggestion that he could just get over it revealed a misunderstanding of how deeply ingrained certain principles were for men. For centuries, he said, men had resisted the idea of sharing their partners, driven by instincts tied to masculinity and the survival of the species. The thought of another man becoming involved with his wife was fundamentally offensive to him. Marvin acknowledged his wish to remain married, but made it clear that he could not and would not tolerate her pursuing other experiences. In his view, their thoughts would inevitably drift elsewhere, creating a rift between them. Cheryl tried to reassure him softly, promising it wouldn't happen that way, but Marvin remained unmoved. Diane, their mediator, decided to conclude the session, urging both of them to consider compromises and keep an open mind. By week 15, summer had hit its stride, and Marvin's Wednesdays were reserved for golf with Greta. Their weekly outings often included just the two of them, although clients occasionally joined. After their games, Greta frequently accepted Marvin's invitations to his home for a simple dinner of steak and salad. One evening, as they relaxed on his patio after dinner, Marvin decided to share his thoughts about his marriage. He opened up about their recent reconciliation meeting, admitting that no progress had been made and that he and Cheryl were no closer to resolving their differences. Marvin also confided in Greta about his feelings toward her, acknowledging how much he enjoyed their time together. However, he emphasized his commitment to avoiding intimacy with anyone while his marriage remained unresolved. He explained that engaging in a relationship with her would feel hypocritical since he was considering divorce over Cheryl's infidelity. Marvin expressed hope that he wasn't being presumptuous in assuming she might share similar feelings. Greta's laughter eased his concerns. She assured him that she valued their time together and appreciated their friendship. For her, Marvin had become her closest companion in town, and she was happy with the current state of their relationship. She encouraged him to focus on resolving his situation with Cheryl before making any changes in his personal life. The next day, Marvin invited Tara to join him for an outdoor concert that Saturday night. She agreed, and they spent the evening driving around in his BMW convertible before heading to the concert. It was one of many summer evenings they enjoyed together, sometimes with her son Sean. Tara often remarked how much Marvin had improved their summer, particularly with Sean thriving in the junior golf program and making new friends. One evening, Tara expressed her gratitude, noting how wonderful Marvin had been for her and Sean. She admitted she wished the summer would never end. Marvin, however, was more pragmatic, acknowledging that their idyllic time might conclude abruptly. Cheryl's self-declared women's empowerment project was set to end in August, and they would soon face decisions about their future. He shared his struggles during their reconciliation sessions, noting that neither he nor Cheryl had budged on their positions. As their conversation grew more personal, Tara asked Marvin whether his no intimacy rule applied to Greta as well. She clarified that she wasn't trying to be intrusive or jealous, but wanted to ensure Greta wasn't being treated as a backup option. She shared her own hurtful experience of being overshadowed by another woman in her previous marriage. Marvin took her hand and reassured her. He explained that his relationship with Greta was platonic and centered mostly on golf and business. Greta herself supported his no intimacy stance, as she didn't want to pursue a relationship without clarity about its direction. Marvin emphasized Tara's importance to him and promised he would never intentionally hurt her. Weeks 16 and 17 saw the summer inching toward fall. Marvin continued his weekly golf games and dinners with Greta while spending much of his remaining time with Tara and Sean. The balance between these relationships suited everyone involved. By week 18, Greta was away in Atlanta for a golf outing and to visit friends during the July 4th weekend. Marvin took the opportunity to invite Tara and Sean to the country club fireworks show. As Sean mingled with his golf friends, Marvin and Tara relaxed in lawn chairs, enjoying drinks and the festive atmosphere. At one point, Tara noticed Marvin gazing distantly toward his house. She gently touched his arm, bringing his focus back to her. Their silent exchange, a simple nod, conveyed an understanding and connection that needed no words. Feeling restless on the night of the fireworks show, Cheryl decided to drive to the country club, parking discreetly a block away. The crowded street, lined with cars on both sides, left her little room to maneuver. Reluctant to drive down the street where she once lived, Cheryl chose to sit and observe the festivities from afar. She noticed members strolling to their cars and homes, among them Marvin and Tara, walking arm in arm with a young boy. Cheryl watched silently as they disappeared into the house that had once been hers, resisting the urge to approach or draw attention to herself. Fighting a wave of emotion, she sat quietly until they were out of sight. By week 19, Cheryl's social life had taken a lively turn. Twice a week, she went clubbing, relishing the freedom to dance, sip cosmopolitans, and tease the men who pursued her. While she never crossed any lines, she enjoyed the thrill of being chased and the attention that came with it. In the back of her mind, she remained cautious. She suspected Marvin might have hired a private investigator to monitor her activities, especially after he somehow learned about Roberto, despite their interactions being nothing more than harmless flirtation. To ensure her privacy, Cheryl adopted a series of precautions when planning a meeting with Ted. She rented a car to avoid any potential tracking devices on her own vehicle, used a different purse, and made the call to Ted from a discarded phone she found at a Walmart. When Ted confirmed he'd be in Dallas for the weekend, Cheryl suggested meeting at a bar near his hotel. He eagerly agreed. That evening, Ted greeted her with a toast, raising a glass of Macallan whiskey to her arrival. After a couple of drinks, they headed to the hotel, Ted grinning as he followed Cheryl down the hall. By week 20, Cheryl's son Robbie was nearing the end of his summer internship at a factory in Nashville. The experience had been enriching, and he looked forward to the professional connections it would bring. Earlier in the summer, Robbie had shared a dorm with another intern, Matt, during orientation. Though Matt had since been assigned to Dallas, the two had remained friendly. When Matt returned to Nashville for a meeting, He and Robbie reunited and roomed together once more. During this visit, Matt's father, Ted, arrived in town and invited both young men out for dinner. Over steaks, they laughed and chatted, the conversation eventually turning to plans for the evening. Robbie and Matt suggested heading to a club, and though Ted hesitated, he agreed to join them. An hour into the night, Matt casually brought up a wild night he'd had with his father at a Dallas club. "This place doesn't hold a candle to that one," Matt said with a grin. Ted chuckled. "That was a memorable night." "What happened?" Robbie asked, curious. Matt laughed, recounting the story. "Dad met this woman around his age. She practically threw herself at him, and they ended up leaving together. She wasn't trashy, though. She was celebrating her 25th college reunion with friends and just wanted some attention. She was going through a divorce and needed to feel wanted." Robbie froze as the details began aligning too closely with his mother's trip to Dallas. Trying to stay composed, he asked, "What was her name?" Ted, puzzled, replied, "She said her name was CJY?" Robbie's mind raced. Cheryl Johnson, his mother's initials. He probed further. "Can you describe her?" Matt, sensing Robbie's unease, pulled out his phone and showed him a photo. It was of Cheryl and Ted, kissing. Robbie's heart sank as he instantly recognized his mother. Unable to stop himself, he swiped to the next image, despite Matt's attempt to intervene. The next photo left no doubt. Cheryl, in an intimate pose with Ted at the club. Ted, alarmed, quickly tried to explain. "Robbie, she told me she was divorced. I don't get involved with married women. I've been through that pain myself, and I would never do that to another man." Robbie took a deep breath and nodded. "I believe you," he said. He then turned to Matt, asking him to forward the photos. "I need to show these to my dad. He has to know the truth before they decide what to do next." As Matt complied, Robbie stood and thanked Ted for the evening. "Thanks for dinner and drinks," he said, his voice steady but cold. "Goodbye." And with that, Robbie left, his mind already racing with what he would do next. Week 21. Greta called Marvin and requested a home-cooked steak dinner after their Wednesday golf game. Marvin was happy to oblige, preparing a meal that included steak, red wine, and dessert. Later, as they moved to the couch, Marvin sensed an air of seriousness about her. It felt like she might be preparing to deliver bad news, perhaps even end their growing connection. However, Greta began with a warm tone, sharing her thoughts. "You know how much I value our time together," she said, her voice steady but sincere. "We've become close, and I want to discuss something that's been on my mind. I hope this won't hurt what we've built." Marvin braced himself, Cheryl's lingering influence flashing in his thoughts. But as Greta continued, her words surprised him. After spending months together, she explained, she admired his integrity, intelligence, and business sense. She had observed how his practices consistently created mutually beneficial outcomes for clients in his company. Greta expressed respect for what he had built, noting that Marvin's children didn't plan to take over the business. She shared her concern about the company eventually being sold to a chain, losing its local roots. Greta proposed merging their companies. By combining resources, they could share client lists and expand their reach. Her long-term vision included taking over as president when Marvin decided to retire, eventually buying out his stake so he could step back fully or work part-time. She emphasized that he didn't need to decide immediately, but encouraged him to consider the idea. Knowing how much his personal life was weighing on him, Marvin exhaled, relieved. "I thought you were about to tell me you didn't want to see me anymore," he admitted. "Instead, you've given me an incredible opportunity." He praised her acumen and commitment, confessing that he had once hoped his son Robbie would join the business. However, Robbie's summer experience had solidified his plans to pursue engineering. Marvin embraced the idea of merging their companies, viewing it as a chance to secure his legacy while partnering with someone he deeply trusted. Week 22. Robbie, after much deliberation, called his sister Cindy to share what he had discovered about their mother's affair. He sent her a photo of Cheryl kissing Ted, but Cindy dismissed it as insufficient proof. Robbie then sent a more explicit photo, reluctantly providing evidence of their mother's betrayal. "I hate to send you this," Robbie admitted, "but between what Ted told me and this picture, there's no denying what she's done." The revelation left Cindy in shock. Overwhelmed with emotion, she began ranting, calling Cheryl vile names. Between tears, she lamented how their father had dedicated his life to someone who could repay him with such selfishness. "We have to tell Dad," Cindy said, her voice trembling. "I know," Robbie agreed. "Should I do it, or do we do it together?" "Together," she decided firmly. "This can't be a phone call. He'll need us. We're all that's left of this family, and we have to stick together." Week 23. Marvin was elated when Cindy called, asking if she and Robbie could visit the following weekend. He had missed his children, especially with Robbie away for the summer. However, his joy quickly turned to heartbreak when they revealed Cheryl's actions, showing him the photos and recounting the details. Marvin's face turned pale, his voice calm but strained. "I knew something like this might happen," he admitted. "I could see how excited she was about that trip. My head told me it was inevitable, but my heart hoped otherwise." He confessed he had avoided hiring an investigator because he didn't want to face the truth, though deep down he needed to know. He sighed deeply, continuing, "She was a good mother to you both, and a good wife to me for many years. But this shows how far she's drifted. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder, but for me, the longer she's gone, the less I want her back." Having resolved to finalize the divorce, Marvin chose to focus on his children for the rest of the weekend. Though their interactions were tinged with sadness, they found comfort in being together. Marvin's composure impressed Cindy and Robbie, who noted his strength and grace in the face of such a painful revelation. While the laughter they shared was cautious, it was genuine. Marvin had spent the last 6 months preparing himself for this moment, and though it hurt, he was ready to move forward with dignity. Weeks 24 and 25, Cheryl was preparing to move back in with Marvin. She began packing her belongings, starting with outfits she didn't anticipate wearing soon, like a gauzy sundress. Convinced that Marvin had no solid grounds to divorce her for infidelity, she was ready to leave behind her 6-month experiment with independence. Cheryl longed for the comfort of Marvin's spacious, elegant home, a stark contrast to her cramped apartment. She missed the status and privileges that came with being Mrs. Marvin Johnson, such as attending glamorous formal dinners and sitting at the head table. Memories of the lively 4th of July parties at the country club brought a pang of nostalgia. Over time, she noticed her social circle shrinking, with fewer invitations for coffee or lunch at the club. While she had initially found the club scene thrilling, it quickly lost its appeal. She enjoyed dancing and the occasional flirtation, but the men she met seemed intent on immediate gratification, whether in the bathroom, parking lot, or elsewhere. Watching other divorced women navigate the same cycle, Cheryl began to see a version of herself she didn't want to become. Ted had been the exception, the kind of lover she'd envisioned. She imagined occasional weekend escapades with him, keeping Marvin none the wiser. However, her plans began to unravel. None of her children had called in weeks, and attempts to reach them resulted in abrupt hang-ups. Ted had also gone silent, his calls and texts unanswered. Cheryl's phone only buzzed with messages from men at nightclubs who sought little more than fleeting encounters. Frustrated, she wondered if she needed a new phone entirely. Week 26. At Marvin's request, his attorney reached out to Cheryl's lawyer, scheduling a final meeting to determine the fate of their marriage. Marvin demanded 2 things: that Cheryl provide a current STD test, and that both sign the divorce papers at the start of the session. If they decided to reconcile, the symbolic act of tearing up the decree would mark their reunion, and a bottle of champagne awaited to celebrate. However, the requirement of the STD test left Cheryl feeling humiliated. Reluctantly, she visited a clinic for the test, dreading the familiar staff who might judge her. She assured herself she was clean, though the process left her uneasy. For the meeting, Cheryl chose an elegant new dress, carefully applying makeup to present her best self. She was eager to reclaim her role as Marvin's wife, a realization that underscored how much she missed him. She arrived first, followed by her lawyer, with Marvin arriving last. He apologized for his tardiness, placing a striking red envelope on the desk. Cheryl's heart raced, imagining a romantic gesture, perhaps the revival of their canceled trip to Paris. The exchange of STD reports confirmed no issues, much to Cheryl's relief. Both signed the divorce decree, marking a pivotal moment. Marvin then asked Cheryl if she had anything to say. Cheryl spoke earnestly, expressing how difficult the past 6 months had been without Marvin. She framed her time apart as an opportunity for personal growth, promising that the experience had deepened her commitment to their marriage. Cheryl vowed to spend the rest of her life proving her loyalty and love, grateful for the chance Marvin had given her to rediscover herself. Marvin listened intently before responding. "Faith is the foundation of trust in any marriage," he began. "Without trust, love cannot exist. When I filed for divorce, it was because I valued fidelity. Over the past 6 months, I've spent time with several women, but have refrained from pursuing anything more. Cheryl, can you say the same? Have you remained faithful to me?" Cheryl froze, her confidence wavering under his formal tone. "Yes, I've been faithful," she replied. Marvin's expression darkened. He reached for the red envelope, pulling out a photograph of Cheryl kissing Ted. "Is this what you call faithfulness?" he asked, his voice sharp. Caught off guard, Cheryl stammered, attempting to dismiss the photo. "It was just a kiss," she said. "It didn't mean anything." Marvin pulled out another, far more explicit photo, placing it on the table. "And this?" he asked coldly. Cheryl's lawyer advised her to remain silent, but she couldn't stop herself. "Where did you get that? Were you spying on me?" she blurted. "That dress, my dress, was pulled up accidentally when I fell on him." Marvin's voice grew sterner. "This wasn't surveillance. This came from a friend of our son, who overheard Matt and his father joking about the woman who threw herself at Ted in Dallas. They showed him the photo to prove it was you." Cheryl's face drained of color as tears welled in her eyes. Marvin leaned forward, his tone colder still. "Imagine what it felt like for our son to sit across from the man who humiliated his father and reduced his mother to this. And you wonder why they don't answer your calls." Marvin turned to his attorney and handed him the signed decree. "File it," he instructed. He turned back to Cheryl, his voice firm yet calm. "You claim closeness with Ted meant nothing. That's even crueler. If it means nothing to you, yet you know how much it means to me, then how could you? How could you disrespect me so deeply? That, Cheryl, is the worst betrayal of all." Cheryl crumpled under the weight of Marvin's words, tears streaming as she mumbled incoherent pleas. She couldn't muster the strength to leave the room. Even when her attorney gently tugged her arm to guide her out, Cheryl repeated the same desperate refrain. "No, no, no, I want to be your wife again. Please forgive me. I promise to be faithful. Don't do this to me. I can't be divorced like those women in the clubs. Please, Marvin, don't push me away." Her cries echoed through the office as Marvin walked out, her sobs following him even as he reached his car. Unable to face the rest of the day, Marvin drove home and poured himself a stiff whiskey. Lighting a cigar, he tuned into the Frank Sinatra channel on Sirius Radio and stepped out onto his patio. The quiet, serene view provided a semblance of the peace he desperately needed. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Cheryl calling every few minutes, interspersed with messages from Tara, Greta, Robbie, and Cindy. He ignored them all, deleting Cheryl's calls without listening. All in good time, he thought. Deep down, Marvin had always suspected this was how things would end. It was why he had insisted Cheryl move out completely 6 months earlier. He needed that time to adjust to life without her. The woman he had loved was gone long before her affair. Over the last year, he had watched her resentment toward their marriage grow. Whether or not she had cheated seemed irrelevant now. Cheryl had already emotionally left, and the bonds they once shared had unraveled. Tara and Greta, on the other hand, had offered him more genuine care and support in the past few months than Cheryl had in years. The 25-year guarantee on their marriage, as he thought of it, had long expired. Whether it was the whiskey, exhaustion, or the sheer relief of closure, Marvin fell into a deep sleep on the patio. He woke hours later to Tara's gentle touch on his shoulder. Concern etched across her face, she asked softly, "Are you okay?" Marvin offered a weak smile. "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" he replied. Tara chuckled, her tone light but supportive. "Well, you seem to have survived your divorce with your humor intact." He nodded, exhaling deeply. "It ended exactly how I thought it would. I've been preparing for this day ever since she left. The details didn't matter. I knew it would come to this. At least I've had time to plan for the future instead of drifting aimlessly." Tara slid onto the seat next to him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Does that future include me?" she asked. "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. Tara leaned in and kissed him gently. "Take your time," she whispered. "You're closing the chapter on a 25-year relationship, and that doesn't just vanish. I'll be here for you when you're ready." With another kiss, she stood and left. Cheryl, confident Marvin would welcome her back, had already arranged to vacate her apartment at the end of her lease. The sudden reality of needing a new place to live hit hard. Worse, her landlord raised the rent by 40%, forcing her to look for cheaper accommodations. The divorce settlement left her in a difficult position. She had refrained from pushing for more financial support, knowing Marvin would have fought it. The house and business had always been his, inherited before their marriage, and she had little legal claim. She found a modest apartment in a less desirable neighborhood within her budget, but moving costs and deposits were daunting. Cheryl dismissed the idea of buying a small house. It would require upkeep she wasn't willing to handle. Even the thought of taking an evening job filled her with dread, not because of the work itself, but the humiliation of possibly serving her former country club acquaintances. Though her children now answered her calls, their relationship had been strained. They promised to visit the next time they were in town, but Cheryl knew it would take time to rebuild the bonds. As autumn arrived, the shorter days and colder nights mirrored her sense of isolation. This is going to be a long, cold winter, she thought grimly. The following Saturday, Marvin slept in, skipping his usual golf game. Around mid-morning, Greta appeared in his doorway. I heard it was rough, but it's over, she said, her tone teasing. Who told you that? Marvin asked, raising an eyebrow. With a sly smile, Greta replied, We share a lawyer, remember? I threatened to break all his golf clubs if he didn't keep me updated. Marvin laughed and hugged her. Yes, it's finally over, he confirmed. Greta took a deep breath and motioned for him to sit beside her. Now that you're making plans for your future, I need to tell you something, she began. I wanted to bring it up before, but you had enough on your plate. Besides, I was having so much fun with you that I didn't want to spoil the moment. Marvin hesitated, unsure of what she was about to say. The women in town find you very attractive, Greta began. Now that your divorce is finalized, you're going to draw even more attention. I'm sure you'll remarry someday, but if you ever proposed to me, I'd have to decline, because I'm already married. Marvin blinked in shock. What? Married? To who? My wife lives in Atlanta, Greta explained calmly. We've been married for 5 years. One of the reasons I travel there so often is to visit her. I'm a lesbian, Marvin. I have been for 10 years. That doesn't change how much I love you as a friend and want you in my life. Still stunned, Marvin listened as Greta continued. I'm perfectly happy with the relationship we've had this summer. Tara doesn't need to worry about me competing for your affection. If she's important to you, she's important to me. We're business partners, after all. I even appreciated your no intimacy rule this summer. It made things easier for me and respected my wife's feelings. Greta smiled warmly. So let's continue being the great team we've been. You're one of the best things to happen to me, and I'm glad to call you my friend.
Story 4.
Mom chose my brother's anniversary party over attending my wedding, ignored my achievements for years, now begging for forgiveness after losing her inheritance. My mother has always shown favoritism toward my older brother Marvin over me. I can't quite pinpoint what it is about Marvin that makes him her favorite, but she has adored him since our childhood. And she has never hidden that fact from me. When I was born just a year after Marvin, my parents decided to give me to my grandparents to be raised by them for 8 years. My mother found it too overwhelming to care for both me and Marvin at the same time. According to my grandparents, my mother was going through postpartum depression, which made it difficult for her to care for both me and Marvin. My grandparents didn't put up much of a fight when my mother wanted to give me up to them, understanding the severity of her condition, and my dad couldn't manage to take care of me all alone while also handling his job. As a baby, I had no idea that my grandparents were not my real parents, so I grew up in their loving and blissful household, feeling secure and happy. However, as I started to walk and understand words, things began to change. My parents would come to visit me occasionally, and during these visits, they would explain that they were my real parents and that my stay with my grandparents was only temporary. These visits were always bittersweet and confusing for me. On one hand, I was excited to see my parents. On the other hand, I felt a sense of confusion and abandonment. I would watch my parents spend 2 to 3 hours with me, playing and talking, but then they would bid me goodbye and leave to go back home, taking Marvin with them. This pattern continued, and it became clear to me that Marvin was always their priority, while my grandparents provided me with all the love and care they could. The brief visits from my parents left me feeling like I was unwanted. Finally, when I turned 8 years old, my parents brought me back home. At first, I was excited to return to my family and finally be reunited with them. However, the excitement slowly faded as I began to realize just how much better my life had been with my grandparents. One of the first changes I had to adapt to was sharing a room with Marvin. Marvin had always had his own room, and there was a spare bedroom that my parents could have given me. Instead, they insisted that Marvin and I share a room so that we could bond as brothers. Marvin hated this new arrangement and made his disdain quite clear to me. If I played too loudly or read comic books that my grandparents had bought for me, Marvin would mock me, calling me a brat and a weirdo. Whenever I tried to decorate my side of the room with drawings or posters of my favorite superheroes, Marvin would scoff and call me childish. If I brought home a good grade from school and excitedly showed it to my parents, Marvin would roll his eyes and sarcastically call me the teacher's pet. When I practiced playing the keyboard my grandparents had gifted me, Marvin would tell me I sounded awful and should just give up. Even small things, like how I organized my toys or the way I talked about my day, became reasons for Marvin to ridicule me. He would call me names like nerd or dork whenever I showed interest in reading or learning something new. With time, I realized that the things I enjoyed doing became points of contention. The warmth and acceptance I had felt at my grandparents' home were replaced with a constant sense of tension and conflict. Marvin had a problem with everything I did, and it made me self-conscious. Imagine your older brother, someone you look up to, making fun of you for every small thing. It makes you start doubting yourself. I was too young to understand that what he was doing was basically bullying me. I thought maybe I was the problem and just wanted to fit in with my family. I stopped reading my comic books at home and would only read them in my school library. I stopped playing with my keyboard altogether. I did all of this thinking that maybe, hopefully, my brother would accept me if I changed. Unfortunately, no matter how much I tried to adapt and fit in, Marvin's attitude towards me didn't improve. The more I tried to please him, the more I felt like I was losing parts of myself. Even when I stopped doing all those things that annoyed Marvin, he would find new ways to mock me. I remember in my childhood, I had a lot of pimples due to a skin condition, which has since been remedied. Marvin would constantly tell me how ugly I looked, and that my face was disgusting. Hearing this was so hurtful that I would cry and go to my parents. Instead of supporting me and telling Marvin off, my mother would tell me to stop crying and be a man. Dad wasn't much help either. He would try to stay away from the matter. Mom would tell me how I needed to stand up to my brother instead of coming to her. As a result, due to Marvin's bullying and my parents' inability to make me feel safe and loved, I felt confused and isolated. I longed for the nurturing environment I had with my grandparents, where I had always felt valued and understood. My grandparents did come to visit me whenever they could, and when they did, they would try to gently talk to Marvin and tell him not to trouble me, but he never paid them any heed. Hence, most of the time, I was left alone to deal with things at home. As I started growing up, I slowly became a very angry teenager. I remember that even though Marvin was older than me, I was getting taller than him, and he did not like that at all. He would bully me about my height, calling me a giant or slender man to piss me off. However, this time, instead of asking my parents for help, I started giving it back to him by calling him a shrimp. I would also knowingly hide his books on the top shelf or above the cupboard, so he would not be able to reach them without a chair, which would then give me a reason to make fun of him. He would complain to our parents, and I would sometimes get scolded, but I still felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt for retaliating. While it felt good to stand up for myself, it also meant that our home was becoming an even more hostile environment. The battles between us became more frequent and intense, with neither of us willing to back down. The last straw that proved to me exactly how much my parents favored my brother over me was during my school's annual awards ceremony. I had poured my heart into my studies and was poised to receive the top award in my class. I wanted my parents' support and presence at the ceremony, hoping for their pride and encouragement. However, just days before the ceremony, my mother informed me that Marvin had a swimming competition scheduled on the same day. Despite my ceremony and his competition being hours apart, Marvin wanted to focus on his preparation, and according to my mother, he needed her more. She assured me that my dad would be there to support me. Though disappointed, I resigned myself to the idea that at least one parent would be there for me. On the day of the ceremony, I was shocked when even my dad didn't show up. At the last minute, apparently, my mom had called him urgently, saying Marvin was having a panic attack before his competition and needed him there to calm him down. Dad chose to rush to Marvin's side instead of coming to my awards ceremony. When I walked up to receive my award, I remember seeing no familiar face in the audience cheering me on. I felt nothing but a profound sense of loneliness and abandonment. Later, when I returned home, both my parents and Marvin were absent. I called them, only to learn that they were still with Marvin. Hours passed before they returned, jubilant and celebrating Marvin's victory in his competition. He held an award in his hands as they told me how well my brother had performed in the competition. They hugged him tightly and praised his accomplishments as if it were the most significant event of the year. I couldn't shake the jealousy and hurt I felt at that moment. My parents didn't even apologize to me for missing out on my ceremony. Clearly, it was a stark realization of where I stood in my parents' priorities. Despite my hard work and achievements, I was always overshadowed and unappreciated compared to Marvin. This entire thing became a turning point in my understanding of how my parents viewed us, and it shaped my perception of myself within my own family. I started to stop asking my parents for help or for them to be present. I stopped thinking that I could depend on them. Whenever I performed well in my studies or sports, I no longer bothered telling them anything. The only people I could talk freely about my achievements were my grandparents, and they always appreciated me. Even for small things. There Words meant more to me than any recognition from my parents ever could. When Marvin graduated from high school and was accepted into a prestigious university, my parents made a huge celebration out of it. They were bursting with pride, bragging about his achievements to everyone, and hosting a party in his honor. I joined in congratulating my brother because I genuinely felt happy for him. A year later, when I graduated from high school with acceptance into an Ivy League college, my parents did nothing of that sort. In seeing this, my grandparents wanted to celebrate my achievement by organizing a small gathering with close relatives and some of my friends from school. Initially intended to be a modest affair, word spread and many more family members and friends expressed their desire to join and show their support for me. However, my parents expressed disapproval, deeming this celebration as over the top. They felt that I didn't deserve such a lavish celebration and questioned why my grandparents hadn't done the same for Marvin when he graduated. Admittedly, the party that my grandparents were throwing for me was indeed more lavish than the one my brother had when he graduated. However, I wish my parents could have let me have just one day without complaining. My mother argued that Marvin would feel really bad if he found out that our grandparents were celebrating me with the party, especially considering they had only given him a watch when he graduated. My grandfather, visibly upset, reminded my mother how he and my grandmother always had to step in to support and celebrate me because my parents never did that. He pointed out how my parents had enthusiastically celebrated Marvin's achievements, but seemed indifferent to mine. My grandmother echoed his sentiments, questioning why there was a double standard in celebrating their children's successes. In response, my parents defended themselves, arguing that it was challenging to balance celebrations for two children and that their focus had naturally been on Marvin's milestones since he was the oldest. They claimed their hands were full and that they couldn't do everything for both of us equally. My mother further justified that just because they didn't celebrate me enough didn't mean that they didn't love me, which was laughable to hear. Thankfully, my grandfather felt the same, and he was not convinced. He argued back passionately that being parents meant being there for both children and not just one. He criticized my parents for not treating me with the same enthusiasm and support they always showed Marvin. In the end, my parents had no argument to stand on, so I did end up having a huge party just as my grandparents wanted me to have. I had invited Marvin to attend, but he told me he was too busy to attend a silly little party. For years, my parents continued to show their favoritism towards Marvin, even when we were in college. It's also particularly evident in how they treat us and our significant others. While Marvin and his girlfriend were always warmly welcomed to our family gatherings, I felt increasingly excluded, especially after I started dating my girlfriend Claudia. When Christmas came around, my parents would extend invitations to Marvin and his girlfriend without fail each year. However, after I introduced my girlfriend to them, suddenly, my parents had concerns about their dinner gatherings becoming too crowded if they invited Claudia as well. It felt like a double standard. What made it worse was how my parents viewed and talked about my girlfriend. Despite her impressive academic achievements and successful career, they would find reasons to criticize her, which would piss me off. Meanwhile, Marvin's girlfriend, who didn't work and relied on alimony from her ex-husband, was never questioned or judged in the same way. My mother's comments were particularly hurtful. She once openly expressed to me how she would have preferred me finding a more traditional housewife-type girl instead of someone like my girlfriend, who was so career-driven. She even suggested that Claudia would not be a good mother to my children. Despite her remarks, I continued my relationship because I believed in my girlfriend and our future together. I even stopped attending family dinners and annual Christmas events to avoid giving my parents any reason to criticize my girlfriend. I don't believe my absence had much of an impact on them. Now, coming to the main story of why I am on Reddit today. 6 months ago, I proposed to Claudia, and she said yes. I had no doubts in my mind that she was the one for me. This woman has given me so much love and support over the years, I can't even imagine my life without her. When I informed my parents about the engagement out of courtesy, wanting them to hear the news from me rather than from someone else, I was met with mixed reactions. My dad seemed genuinely happy for me and congratulated me, while my mom remained silent. Later, my mother texted me to express her disappointment. She said she was disappointed that I had not listened to her and had gone ahead with the proposal to Claudia. She claimed that as a woman, she knew other women better and felt Claudia would not be a good fit for our family. I was taken aback and told her to knock it off, as I was tired of her constantly bringing down my relationship. I asked her if she had any legitimate reason for her dislike of Claudia, or if it was just unfounded prejudice. This is when my mom retorted, saying that Claudia constantly talked back to her, unlike my brother's girlfriend. This statement left me speechless. It was true that Claudia isn't someone who lets other people walk all over her. In the past, whenever my mother had tried to subtly mock her education, her outfit, or her career choice, Claudia has never let it slide. This is one of the things I admire about Claudia. She stands up for herself. She's aware of our family's history, and unlike me, she doesn't hesitate to assert herself with my mother. However, Claudia has never been outright disrespectful. Her responses are typically cheeky and sarcastic, but clearly my mother has hated Claudia all this time because of this. It was clear to me then that my mother's issue with Claudia was not based on any real behavior or character flaw, but rather on some outdated notion of how she expected a woman to behave. Hence, I told my mother that I didn't feel what Claudia did was wrong in any way, and that I wished I was more assertive like her. My mother retorted that the girl was bad news and that she was changing me too much. I paid little attention to my mother's criticisms and continued enthusiastically planning my wedding with Claudia. 2 months ago, I sent out wedding invitations to everyone, including my brother, Marvin, despite not receiving any congratulations from Marvin after the engagement. I still harbored no ill feelings and extended an invitation to him for the wedding. To my surprise, Marvin declined the invitation without any explanation, which disappointed me somewhat. But what truly caught me off guard was when my dad called to inform me that while he would be attending, my mom had decided not to come. I knew my mom had reservations about Claudia, but I had hoped that for the sake of our family and my special day, she would set aside those differences and join us. I was taken aback and asked why. My dad explained that Marvin had apparently planned an anniversary party for his girlfriend on the very same day, which my mom was going to attend instead of my wedding. This revelation was weird since I followed Marvin on social media and knew that they had recently celebrated their anniversary already. I couldn't understand why they would hold another party on the exact same day as my wedding. Instead of confronting my mom first, I decided to reach out to Marvin directly to clarify things. Although we didn't often speak, I wanted to handle the situation with respect and dignity. I called Marvin and asked him straightforwardly about the anniversary party, and if that was really the reason he wasn't planning to attend my wedding. To my surprise, Marvin confirmed this was indeed the case. He explained that he and his girlfriend had originally wanted to celebrate their anniversary with a party, but they did not have enough money saved up at the time. Hence, Marvin admitted that he had gone out of his way to make it up to his girlfriend by working hard and finding a special venue for their celebration that fit within their budget. Unfortunately, the only available date for this venue happened to coincide with my wedding day. I expressed my disappointment and gently suggested that he could have chosen a different date, emphasizing just how much I would have appreciated his presence at my wedding. However, Marvin replied that his girlfriend's happiness came above everything else and made it clear that he wasn't willing to change their anniversary party date just to accommodate my wedding plans. His words stung, and he didn't even wait for me to reply before disconnecting the call. Later, when I called my mom to discuss the situation, she resorted to the same age-old explanation she often used with me. She insisted that Marvin would feel hurt if she didn't attend his anniversary party, and reiterated that my dad was already planning to attend my wedding, so I shouldn't be selfish and expect her to come as well. I told her, my voice almost breaking, just how painful it was for me to constantly feel like she treated me as inferior compared to my brother. I explained to her that she could do as she wished, but I was no longer going to acknowledge her as a parent after this. My mother scoffed at my words and told me that I should not be so overdramatic over my wedding. After the fallout with my mom over her refusal to attend my wedding, I chose to cut off communication with her entirely. My main focus shifted to ensuring that Claudia had the most beautiful wedding possible, and that our celebration was filled with joy and love. Despite my disappointment with my mom, I was grateful that my dad honored his promise and stood by me on my special day. When Claudia and I finally tied the knot, my grandparents, who had already anticipated my mom's absence despite their urging, were understandably upset and disappointed. They had even warned my mom beforehand, emphasizing the importance of her presence. The fact that she still chose not to come struck a deep chord with them. What made matters worse was when my brother uploaded pictures after his anniversary party, where my mother could be seen dancing and drinking like there was no tomorrow. The issue wasn't what she was doing, but the way they both seemed to flaunt their disregard for my feelings about their absence from my wedding. My mom never once called me or Claudia to check up on us or congratulate us throughout the whole day. Post-wedding, my grandparents didn't hesitate to confront my mom about her absence from my wedding. They didn't hold back, expressing their disappointment in her behavior, and didn't mince words while telling her plainly that they were fed up with how poorly she had treated me over the years. They told her that they had given her more than enough chances to be a good mother, but she clearly only liked Marvin. They went as far as to threaten her with consequences, including potentially removing her from getting any of their inheritance. When Mom tried to argue back with them, saying how Marvin's party was important too, they informed her that they would make sure that I got every penny of their inheritance since I deserved it more than her. Now, this was a huge thing to be said by my grandparents and completely unexpected. My mom, who had been struggling to justify her absence at my wedding, until then, found herself in a tough spot after hearing this. After her confrontation with her parents, she called me, pleading for forgiveness. Mom expressed disbelief at how missing my wedding had escalated into such a fiasco. During our brief talk, she lamented how unfair it would be if I received my grandparents' inheritance instead of her. She urged me to persuade them not to proceed with any decisions related to their estate. Clearly, she was more concerned about inheriting money than fixing our strained relationship. Hence, I didn't engage in much conversation with her, as I was on my honeymoon and wanted to preserve my mood. However, lately, after I came back from my honeymoon, she's been calling me almost every day, pleading for another chance to make things right between us. She suggested that Claudia and I should have another wedding, this time with just close family members if possible, so she can also attend. She's expressed regret over missing my wedding and insists that I should give her an opportunity to remedy the situation. Her change of heart and persistent requests have put me in a tough spot. On one hand, I understand her desire to make amends, but on the other, it's hard to ignore the hurt caused by her absence and the deeper issues it represents. I don't want to plan another wedding just for her to attend. Also, out of nowhere, Marvin sent me a text saying how I should not have involved our grandparents in our private matters and that Mom is really afraid of losing her inheritance. He said for her sake, I should stage another wedding just to restore the peace within our family. Atia, if I don't give in to the demands of my mom and Marvin to have another wedding? Update 1, I have talked to Claudia about this, and she agrees that having another wedding would be too cumbersome and unnecessary. She believes I should stand up to my mom and tell her that she had her chance to attend our original wedding, but she chose not to, so now she can deal with it. I want to address some confusion. First of all, I don't hate my brother, even though my parents, especially my mom, have always favored him over me. Over time, I've come to understand that he observed and learned from how my parents treated us. Clearly, my mom favored him, and he took advantage of that. While it would be easy to harbor resentment as an adult, I would prefer to work on our issues and move forward. However, it seems my brother is still immature and enjoys playing those same childish games. Secondly, my grandparents do intend to leave their inheritance just to me, not to my mom or Marvin. It's true my grandparents and I share a much closer bond since they basically raised me, but also, they know that my parents are going to take care of Marvin eventually. So they want to look out for me by leaving me with their inheritance. Lastly, my grandparents were not the only ones who were upset with my mother for not attending my wedding. Other family members also expressed their disappointment to my mother for not attending my wedding, but she seemed indifferent to their concerns. It was only when my grandparents decided to remove her from their inheritance that she started to change her attitude and demanded that I have another wedding to include her. Update 2, it's official. My grandfather has just informed me that he and Grandma have drafted new wills, naming me as their sole heir and removing my mother from everything. While I had expected this outcome, it still came as a shock. My grandfather explained that their decision was not only influenced by how my mother treated me, but also by their belief that I would care for them in their old age better than my mother would. They trust that I won't abandon them to a care facility unless absolutely necessary and have confidence in my ability to manage their finances responsibly. Regardless of their reasons, I am grateful and touched by the depth of love my grandparents have shown me through this decision. It's a stark contrast to how I've often felt less prioritized by my own parents. As you can imagine, this news hasn't gone over well with my mother. She's been calling me incessantly and sending messages accusing me of blindsiding her and claiming I have no right to inherit anything from her parents. It's true when people say money can really change a person, because it's almost like she thinks I'm stealing from her when I haven't even received anything. When I firmly suggested that she address her concerns directly with my grandparents, she responded with accusations that I had manipulated my way into their favor. I reminded her that any changes in their will were a direct consequence of her own actions over the years, which had strained our relationship and influenced their decision. Our argument grew heated, and in a moment of raw honesty, or perhaps spite, she confessed something profoundly hurtful, that she wished I had never been born. She revealed that I was an accidental pregnancy and blamed me for causing her postpartum depression. She confessed that initially she considered even giving me away just to get rid of me, but decided against it because of her parents' conservative views, opting instead to have them care for me. She admitted that she loved Marvin more because things were always easier with him. I was deeply wounded by her words. But I told her I appreciated her honesty because it freed me from feeling guilty about our strained relationship. I made it clear that I didn't want to continue a cycle of arguments and hurtful exchanges, and that I simply wanted to live my life in peace. I firmly instructed her not to contact me again, and warned that I would involve the police if she ever showed up at my doorstep uninvited. After that conversation with my mom, I reached out to my dad. He acknowledged that some of what Mom had said about my accidental pregnancy and her struggles with postpartum depression was true, but he reassured me that he never regretted having me. I expressed to him how their favoritism towards my brother over the years had hurt me deeply, and he apologized sincerely. While I'm uncertain about the future of my relationship with my dad, I've asked him for some space for now, and he respected my decision. As for Marvin, I sent him a lengthy text expressing how he could have been a better and more mature sibling to me, especially considering how much I looked up to him all my life. I opened up about feeling incredibly alone while growing up with my grandparents and how desperately I wanted his acceptance when I moved in with our parents. I made it clear that I never harbored any resentment towards him, and instead of competing with me, he could have chosen to be a supportive part of my life. I also conveyed my disappointment in him as an older brother and stated that I was putting an end to our relationship from now on. Since then, I have blocked him and currently have no plans to unblock him in the near future. I am focused on building a beautiful future with my wife, Claudia. It's true, I am glad that I have a really headstrong wife. Her support and love have been a cornerstone in my life, and with her by my side, I feel confident in facing whatever challenges come our way.